to order the Finance Committee, and the first half hour we'll deal with business, and I believe Peter, Julian, you have a motion. I know Mr. Polyev also has one, but I believe yours was in first on, so we'll start with you if you want to go ahead, Peter.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Hopefully this won't be controversial. I'd like to move that pursuant to Standing Order 1081A, the committee order that any contracts concluded with We Charity and Me to We, all briefing notes, memos, and emails from senior officials prepared for or sent to any minister regarding the design and creation of the Canada Student Service Grant, as well as any written correspondence and records of other correspondence with We Charity and Me to We from March 2020 be provided to the committee no later than August 8th, 2020, that matters of cabinet confidence and national security be excluded from the request, and that any redactions necessary, including to protect the privacy of Canadian citizens and permanent residents whose names and personal information may be included in the documents, as well as public servants who've been providing assistance on this matter, be made by the Office of the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Counsel of the House of Commons. And just briefly, Mr. Chair, these, as the Globe and Mail outlined this morning, a lot of questions that are being asked around this. As Finance Committee, we were charged back in March, you'll recall, to do the stewardship around all spending programs related to COVID-19, including this one. And so our responsibility as the Finance Committee is to ask these questions and get answers on behalf of Canadians. We need to know whether or not this decision went to Cabinet, why there was a reduction in the number of positions for Canada Summer Jobs. It's certainly something that's impacted ridings across the country. Why this organization was put forward instead of our civil service, and I understand the government is moving back to the civil service potentially for this program. On sole source, what was the process? How was the organization informed? All of these are questions that people are asking. So as the stewards of the public trust around all the spending related to COVID-19, I'd like to move this motion so that we can get those answers for Canadians. And hopefully we'll have consensus on the committee.
Okay, and I believe Peter, I think everyone has a copy of it. I'll go to Mr. Fragascatis first, and then Mr. Fraser.
Thanks very much.
Anybody else put their hands up so I know where to go? Go ahead, Peter, and then Julie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a friendly amendment to put forward. And then I have a question for Mr. Julian with respect to the friendly amendment. And I'm going to seek the advice of the clerk on this in terms of where it ought to be included. But I also I believe that the contribution agreement between the department and we ought to be a part of the motion as well.
So what's your wording, though?
That the contribution agreement between the department and we be included, be accessible, something along those lines. But as for its placement, I'm not quite sure.
Peter, Julian?
I think that's included in the motion as written. That the it allows for all of the information, briefing notes, memos, and emails. But I'll certainly let colleagues join in. For the moment, I'd like to keep the motion as presented.
It's a friendly amendment, so it just provides a specific understanding that would be included as well.
So the amendment, I believe, and I'll have to ask the clerk for this. The amendment is in order, and we will have to go to the amendment first. But I think we can go ahead, Carolyn.
It is in order, but I would ask that we know exactly where we want it in the motion, because depending on where it is put in the motion could change the sense of the motion. So I would ask that the member specify where in the motion they would like it added.
Okay. If I could, Mr. Chair, perhaps it could be included right after the word emails. How does that work?
All briefing notes.
So you'd strike and memos would get a comma. You strike and emails, include a new word there. That new word being and then the point about the contribution agreement phrased as I did a moment ago.
Could you do it this way? All briefing notes, memos, and emails, including all briefing notes, memos, including the contribution agreement between, and then end emails from senior officials.
Sure,
I think it'd be better in there.
That works for me.
Does that work, Carolyn? Okay. The discussions on the amendment, I know Peter made a point. We'll have to start a new list here. Discussions on the amendment. Is there any discussion, or will we move in the amendment and go back to the original motion? Or go back to the motion as amended, whichever way you go. Any further discussion on the amendment? It's just being more specific, I would suggest, to make sure that contribution agreement is there.
Exactly.
My sense is it's redundant, but I'll let the committee decide.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? We'll have to go with a voting list because I might miss somebody's hands on here. Carolyn, if you could go through a voting list, please.
Just unmute myself here. Will do. So Ms. Zarowitz?
Hey, you're in mute, Julie.
The only time you can keep me quiet with that mute button. I'm okay with the amendment.
Okay, Mr. Fragiskatos?
Yes.
Mr. Fraser?
Yes.
Ms. Koutrakis?
Yes.
Mr. McLeod?
Agreed. Yes.
Mr. Poliev?
Pierre, you're in mute.
Sorry, I just wanted to build some suspense. Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Cumming?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Saint Marie?
No.
And Mr. Julian?
No.
Okay. So the yeas have it.
Okay, so the amendment carries, and on the motion as amended, my speaking order is put up your hands all. I have Mr. Fragiskatas, I have Mr. Fraser, I have Ms. Zarowitz. We'll start with that, and then we'll see where we go. Mr. Fragiskatas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to draw attention to the section of the motion that begins that matters of cabinet confidence and national security be excluded from the request, and that any redactions necessary, including to protect the privacy of Canadian citizens and permanent residents whose names and personal information may be included in the documents, as well as public servants who have been providing assistance on the matter, be made to the office of the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Council of the House of Commons. So it's raised here because of a curiosity that I have. The motion adopted at the Health Committee a while back called for all documents, including briefing notes, memos, and emails from senior officials prepared for the Minister of Health, Minister of Transport, Minister of Public Safety, Foreign Affairs, and Defense regarding the outbreak of the coronavirus no later than March 15th, 2020. We see in the motion why redactions of national security was important in that case. And that's why I've read in detail what was presented at Health Committee, but why the focus on national security here? What are the concerns regarding national security on the part of Mr. Julian? I'm curious about that.
Okay, points been made. Do you want to answer that, Peter? And then I'll go to Mr. Fraser.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I thank Mr. Fragascatos for his question. I mean, this is a standard format that other committees have adopted, potentially not the Health Committee at that time, but generally this is the type of structure that allows for those matters that shouldn't be released to, with a very strict framework, be protected items. So it's not something that's out of the ordinary at all.
Mr. Fraser?
Yeah, on the same issue, and it's substantively, I don't really have a problem with what you're proposing, Peter. There's a technical piece that I have a little bit of concern around. I spent a little bit of time working for an access to information organization, and the way that you frame the issue has, or the motion has two issues that I've got a little bit of concern about. One, to the point on sort of national security and cabinet confidence, those would routinely be excluded under the ordinary process, as would things like solicitor-client privilege, real estate transactions. There's a handful in the Access to Information Act. The second piece is the clerk and parliamentary counsel, the disclosure of Canadians' personal information that could be included in these documents to the people you've requested make the redactions, I understand would in and of itself be a violation of the of federal privacy legislation. I've seen two ways. You're right. I've seen this type of a motion on a couple of committees, and I've seen as many or more essentially try to do the same thing by tasking the department with producing them in accordance with the required access to information practices. Is there a reason? Like, I really don't have a strong preference here, but there are two issues that I've seen cause, or similar kinds of issues I've seen cause problems before, and I'm wondering if there's a reason why you've got the preferred approach with the language you've used, as opposed to, say, the Health Committee, or I think Government Operations Committee had a similar one to what Peter's mentioned. So I'm not going to dig my heels in and be difficult here, but if there's a reason to go your way, I'd be interested in knowing it, because I do see there could be a bit of an administrative difficulty and a potential privacy violation proceeding with the motion as is.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Zurowitz and then back to Mr. Julian. You're making note of that, I assume, Peter. Go ahead, Ms. Zurowitz.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to say more accountability and transparency is extraordinarily important, and particularly at this time, during this pandemic, when we're spending an exorbitant amount of money in a very short period of time during an unprecedented period. I wonder, though, to what end is this motion and to what purpose? There is already someone highly qualified looking into the Me Too decision with respect to the Canada Student Grant Service Program. We have Mr. Dion, who's our ethics commissioner. He is a 40-year seasoned, outstanding, independent public servant who's agreed to do an investigation that I no doubt will do a complete, full accounting of the matter. And I just wonder, what will this motion add other than duplication? And given the fact that we have so many big issues in front of us for our bureaucrats to focus on, is this really how we want to be using their time? And I just want to mention, I was a little fearful sort of mentioning this point, because it always gives the perception that, oh, well, are you trying to cover up something? Do you not want more transparency? That's the furthest thing from the case. Absolutely, accountability and transparency on everything that we do, I think, has to be paramount. I do, though, in terms of this motion, I wonder, it's a huge amount of data gathering in a short period of time, and to what end? Essentially, the motion is really huge data gathering by April 8th. And so those are my comments and my thoughts for the moment.
Okay, back to you, Peter. And while you're at it, I'm neutral on this, but is the August 8th deadline possible for people to pull that together? Just I don't know if that's doable in terms of a time frame. I've been involved in access to information too, and have signed off on requests where I have had letters in the system, and I just don't know if the August date deadline is doable. That's what the motion says, but it's your motion, and I just don't know if that's possible. I wonder if we're putting too tight a time frame, but that's entirely up to you. Go ahead. Floor is yours, Peter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciated Mr. Fraser, Ms. Zerowitz's comments. They, as always, put very eloquently, but I respectfully disagree. And in terms of the access to information, providing, as Mr. Fraser has mentioned, the Parliamentary Council with that determination is something that is relatively commonplace with committees. And as far as Ms. Zerowitz's comments, the reality is we were given the stewardship of the financial outlay through this pandemic. That's our responsibility. Parliament gave this finance committee the charge or the stewardship over all government expenditures related to COVID-19. So this is just doing our job. I think the ethics commissioner may be looking into whether or not there's an ethical violation. This is a question of financial procedure, financial control, and these questions deserve answers in the same way that we may find there are other issues that come up in the coming months that as stewards of the financial outlay of the federal government, the Finance Committee is called upon to look into. The House of Commons directed us that way. That's our responsibility. Hopefully we'll get answers in the coming weeks. I don't think a 1 month timeline is by any means too onerous, but we'll have the answers, and that we don't know how long this pandemic is going to continue. We don't know what other programs may need to be brought forward to deal with the pandemic. We have that responsibility anytime there are unanswered questions to delve a little bit deeper and to get the information, and that's what this motion is endeavoring to do.
Okay.
Chair, if I could.
Okay, Peter, and then Julie. Peter, Mr. Fragaskatos, and Ms. Zerowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect to Mr. Julian, I still have not heard an explanation as to why this matter constitutes an issue of national security. I could see how in the motion that was introduced in the Health Committee, why national security language was used there. But why is the concept of national security included in here at all? I have not heard an explanation from Mr. Julian.
I'll go to Ms. Zerowitz, and I'll let Peter answer that then. I'll just keep things in order here. Ms. Zerowitz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I appreciated Mr. Julian's response. I would say that my understanding is that there's been no money spent, so I'm not quite sure what financial accountability we're actually looking at by asking for all these documents. So that's one. And then the second comment, and I'm glad that the chair brought that up. I think it was an excellent point. It is a very short period of time for an extraordinary amount of data, and wonder whether that is doable. And you didn't get a chance to address that, and would ask that you do.
Chair, can I get in on the debate as well when you have a moment?
Yeah, I'll let Peter was next on the list, and then you, Mr. Polyev. Mr. Julian?
Just in answer to Mr. Fragaskatos, this is a standard formulation. No, I am not tying this issue to national security, where we have had in the past, as you're aware, Mr. Chair, governments, both conservative and liberals, ask to ensure that documentation that's not related to those things is put in the public domain. So this is a standard process, standard wording, as a number of members have said, and it goes in the same way that other motions that look to production of documents have been formulated as well. No, I'm not tying it to issues of national security, and I think Mr. Fragaskatos is aware of that. The 1 month timeline is very realistic. We're talking about information that should be top of mind and easy to present, and it helps to clarify the issue and the questions that people are asking.
Okay, Mr. Polyev, and then if we could, I would like to, I don't want to cut off debate, but I'd like to get to Mr. Polyev's motion too, as we could, because we do have a group waiting at 3:30 Ottawa time. Pierre. Your mute's on.
Thank you, Chairman. I too have a bit of an issue with the 1 month timeline to produce all these documents. It does seem a little bit long. These documents should be ready right now. I mean, the government has been seized with this controversy and basically nothing but for the last 10 days ever since the scandal was revealed. So it should not be hard for the committee to receive that documentation, say, by early next week. But that being said, in the spirit of compromise, we're obviously going to support Mr. Julian's motion regardless. A month to produce documents on something like this is an extraordinarily long time. And I think if the clerk of the Privy Council were to put out a call to all the officials who were supposedly involved in this decision, he could probably summon those documents in a couple of hours. So I do think Peter's suggestion that we would wait until early August is extremely generous. And again, I would have preferred that he suggested a shorter timeline, but given that that he has, in his judgment, come up with this data, we will accept it.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up or any other points been raised. Could we go to the vote, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we can. Okay. So Ms. Zarowitz?
I'm abstaining from voting.
Mr. Fajskatos?
In favor.
Mr. Fraser?
He lost power and he ended up being booted out. He just sent us a note.
Oh, okay. We can come back to him. Ms. Koutrakis?
In favor.
And Mr. McLeod?
Yes.
Mr. Poiliev?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Your mic's on, Michael.
Sorry. Yes, I'm in support.
Mr. Cumming?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Sainte-Marie?
Le vote pour
Is the vote on the Mr. Julian's main motion and not on the amendment. The motion has already been amended. It is on the main motion. All right.
Julian?
Moi, je suis pour.
I'm for it as well as a previous member.
Okay, thank you. And we'll now turn to the motion by Mr. Carried. The motion by Mr. Poiliev. Go ahead, Mr. Poiliev.
Yes, so I will read off the motion that the Standing Committee on Finance, before I do actually, I should say I made some very small changes to it to subtract a few witnesses from the list that I had included in the motion circulated. So, but other than that, the motion is the same as you all have seen, that the Standing Committee on Finance, as part of its study on COVID-19, hold hearings in July 2020 for no less than 4 meetings for a duration of 3 hours each to examine how much the government spent in awarding the $912 million sole sourced contract to We Charity, and how the outsourcing of the Canada Student Service Grant to We Charity proceeded as far as it did, that the committee produces a report on its findings to be tabled in the House of Commons, that the witnesses must include but are not limited to the following: the Clerk of the Privy Council, Ian Shugart, the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of Skills Employment Branch of Employment and Social Development Canada. By this, I refer to the official that Mark Kielburger claims to have told him to deliver that he would deliver the $912 million Canada Student Service Grant. That the witness list include Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth, Bardish Chagger, Volunteer Canada, and any witnesses that committee members submit as part of a routine planning for a committee study. That is the motion.
Okay, thank you. It's open for discussion. Just a point of clarification on my end, Mr. Polyev. No less than 4 meetings, 3 hours each, and I'm assuming one should never make assumptions, but I'm assuming that the witness list would be somewhere along the lines of proportionality in terms of our original motion at committee, that each party would have the right to give the clerk their witnesses, and the ones that you name are certainly a part of that.
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. Just so we're clear on that. All right, floor is open. Who wants to, Julie or Ms. Sirowitz? And then Mr. Julian. Okay, and then Mr. Fragiskatis. Okay, Ms. Sirowitz.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just want to mention when I saw this motion come in, I was super disappointed. 4 meetings of the Finance Committee, 3 hours each during the summer to discuss a program where there's been zero evidence of misspending of any money. And in fact, I don't think there's been any money spent on the program as it was just announced. If there was some admin stuff, I think that money's already been sent back. I mentioned when we talked about the previous motion, we have a highly qualified ethics commissioner who is looking into the actual decision around the Canada Student Service contract. And I have no doubt that he will be very thorough in his investigation. My understanding also is that the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates also has allocated 4 committee meetings to actually studying this as well. And I just wonder, given everything that we have to look at and all our priorities, is this the best way to spend Finance Committee time? There are major economic sectors that need our attention. The oil and gas sector, you have HR technology, resources leaving the sector. How is it that we can develop while we're reducing emissions and moving to some sort of a low carbon future? How do we start the just transition process? We have the arts and culture, the tourism and hospitality sectors, where the rug has been pulled from under them. How can they be supported during this time and beyond? These are the areas that I really believe need to be the focus of our finance committee. And so I will not be supporting this motion, and very disappointed that we wouldn't have some other options to be looking at this moment.
Okay, Mr. Julian, and then Mr. Fragiskatis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be supporting the motion, and I agree with Ms. Zerowitz. You'll recall, Mr. Chair, we brought forward a plan. The NDP wanted to work all summer and have a variety of meetings throughout the summer months. So as far as I'm concerned, if Ms. Zerowitz has other studies she wants to undertake at the same time, I'd be more than happy to consider that. This is a pandemic. We have to make sure that government programs are being put into place properly. That isn't the case, it seems, in this case, though, as the Globe and Mail reported this morning, there are a lot of unanswered questions that people certainly need to get. But the Finance Committee is the principal steward. And I think if there are other programs that Ms. Zerowitz or any other member suggests that need looking into, we should be prepared to do that. I'm certainly prepared to work all summer because we have that responsibility from the House of Commons to do that stewardship and look over programs that are going well, but also programs that may not have been properly conceived.
Mr. Fragiskatis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've heard already, the Government Operations and Estimates Committee is devoting 4 meetings to the subject. I wonder if Mr. Polyev would entertain a friendly amendment to the effect that we would have 2 meetings on this. I would also put to him that the list of witnesses he's come up with are in some cases very relevant, in other cases not relevant at all. The clerk of the Privy Council, for example, was not involved in this decision. So if we're going to devote time on this, I would want to hear from people that were directly involved. Again, it's a matter of hearing from people that did participate in decision making. so we can maximize our time as committee members. I would also draw attention to Ms. Kraus, and this is not a comment personally, certainly against Ms. Kraus, not at all, but what expertise does Ms. Kraus have when it comes to this particular decision? She obviously did not take part in it. What commentary can she add that will help us understand the trajectory of the process in terms of the decision? What happened? What did not? Again, I would suggest that Ms. Kraus be taken off this list. In addition, as I mentioned already, the clerk of the Privy Council. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we'll have to see if it's a friendly amendment or not, Mr. Polyev. 2 meetings instead of 4. We'll get an answer on that, and then we'll go back to the list if there's any additions to it.
No.
Okay. No to the 2-meeting proposal. Do I hear any other amendments? Do I see anybody else putting their hand up or yelling at me to be on the speakers list? Okay, are we ready for the question then? And I don't believe Mr. Fraser is back. Okay, Madam Clerk, up to you.
Okay, so the vote is then on the main motion, not on the amendment, because we've disregarded that, just to be clear. So Ms. Zarowitz.
No.
Mr. Fragiskatos.
Yes.
Mr. Fraser is not there. Ms. Koutrakis.
Yes.
Mr. McLeod.
Yes.
Mr. Polyev.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Mr. Cumming.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Saint Marie.
Mr. Saint Marie, yes.
Yes.
The yeas have it.
Okay, the motion is carried. We will have to go to the other meeting, but could I have some idea, Pierre, when we try and start these meetings?
Well, the idea was to hold them all within this month. So I think we could just get subcommittee together and book some time and we'd be off to the races.
Yeah, we can do that then, and parties think about their witness lists. We have 4 3-hour meetings, and we certainly don't want to go with more witnesses than we have on our regular pre-budget consultations. That may be too many, I would think. Okay, we'll get together as a steering committee and try and sort this out. I'll get in contact with people as soon as possible. All right, with that, meeting adjourned, and we will have
Suspended.
Meeting suspended, and we will go to our regular meeting. We'll suspend for 3 minutes, 2 minutes. but I will welcome people to. We had a committee meeting first for the witnesses that are here. So we'll continue and welcome people to meeting number 40, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, and we're operating under an order of reference from the House and a meeting on the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as has no doubt been stated to you on your invitation. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So with that, I would certainly like to welcome the witnesses from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. And I'm not sure who's leading off with a presentation, but whoever you are, whether it's Ms. Robinson or whoever, go ahead, introduce yourself, and the floor is yours. Then we'll turn to questions from members.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am the lead-off hitter today, and I'm very happy to be here. And thank you very much for the invitation to update the committee on how FCAC is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis très heureuse d'être.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm very happy to be here today. And I thank you for the invitation to update the committee on how FCAC is responding to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Comment on m'a suggéré?
As requested, I will be speaking only in English to avoid any technical difficulties.
As suggested to me, I will be speaking in English today to avoid technical difficulties with the back and forth. I'm joined by three colleagues, Frank Lofranco, who is Deputy Commissioner of Supervision and Enforcement, Teresa Frick, our Director of Supervision, and Ruth Stephen, Director of Strategic Policy, Research, and Experimentation. They're here to provide additional detail on specific program areas if desired by the committee. I'll first give a short background on the agency and then focus my comments on our response to the pandemic. FCAC is a federal agency that operates independently and is primarily funded by the financial institutions we regulate. Our mandate is to protect Canadian financial consumers, and we do that in two principal ways. First, we supervise federally regulated financial entities, and that's primarily banks, for compliance with the consumer protection measures as set out in legislation, public commitments, and codes of conduct. Second, we promote financial literacy through education and raise awareness of consumer issues and rights. Knowledgeable consumers are better protected consumers. I was appointed commissioner last August, so this is my first appearance before this committee. And since that time, we have been focused on preparing the agency for our next stage of evolution. Even prior to the unique challenges of COVID-19, we had a lot on our plate. Our role was recently strengthened, as you know, by the legislative changes to the FCAC Act and the Bank Act that received royal assent in December 2018. They provide new powers for the Commissioner, embed financial literacy as core to our mandate, and modernize Canada's financial consumer protection framework. Some of these provisions came into force on April 30th of this year. The other elements will come into force over time as they require the regulations that are currently being drafted and time for both industry and FCAC to prepare for implementation. We've made remarkable progress over the past year. We refreshed our vision and mission statements, introduced a new organization structure, recruited a new senior management team, including Frank Lofranco, who's joined me today, who's been with us 2 months, published our strategic priorities, and improved the transparency of our adjudication process. Of course, there's still much to do. FCAC has a team of about 160 people who've been working remotely since the middle of March. And like many organizations, this is a difficult new reality for our employees and has required us all to adapt and adjust. but I'm happy to report that thanks to the dedicated efforts of our team, we have adapted and have maintained our progress even during these unprecedented times. Turning to our COVID-related actions, in our supervisory work, we have maintained close contact with the financial institutions we regulate and have proactively communicated our expectations, including that they prioritize providing safe access to financial services, particularly for vulnerable consumers. We adjusted our priorities so that financial institutions could reassign internal resources to adapt their operations and to accommodate the demand for financial relief. For example, we paused our industry consultations on the new framework for the past few months. That work is now back on track. However, we recognize that we need to remain flexible and may need to adjust again as the situation evolves. Despite considerable disruption and pressure on their operations and employees, banks have demonstrated a commitment to ensuring that financial services remain available, and they've shown a willingness to work with impacted consumers who request financial relief. And we've provided some data on that in our background information. We consider these relief measures to be public commitments and are therefore monitoring that they are implemented in a fair and appropriate manner. And to that end, we have been receiving weekly reports on payment deferrals for mortgages and other credit products since April. And based on our data, while the implementation has not been perfect, most consumer requests have been approved and in a timely manner. On the consumer education side, FCAC is supporting consumers with unbiased, fact-based information through our call center and online resources. Our call center volume has increased by 28% compared to the same period last year. And our online resources have also seen increased traffic, as we quickly created and promoted new pandemic-specific information that is responsive to the current situation. We are committed to providing updates also as the situation evolves. And finally, through our ongoing research programs, FCIC monitors financial consumer trends and behaviors. For example, we are building on the baseline established by the Canadian Financial Capability Study, which we published last fall. Starting this month, we will be launching 2 new monthly surveys to update that information and assess the changes resulting from the impact of the pandemic. And these survey findings will help inform our supervision efforts and enable us to refine and update our educational information for consumers. From the outset of the pandemic, we have worked closely with our stakeholders to gain insights into the issues consumers are facing. And this includes the 18 financial literacy networks, which represent over 600 community organizations across the country. We've also initiated communication with provincial regulators on matters of mutual interest and have been coordinating closely with the other members of the Financial Institutions Supervisory Committee, or FISC, which, as you know, includes the Department of Finance, Bank of Canada, CDIC, OPSI, and ourselves. In addition, FCAC actively participates internationally in organizations such as the OECD, where we share information and ideas and learn about best practices elsewhere. Through all these efforts and initiatives, we aim to live up to our vision, which is to be a leader and innovator in financial consumer protection. Consumers must have confidence in the financial system, especially in times of crisis. The actions we and our FISC partners have been taking in response to the pandemic are designed to contribute to that confidence. And FCAC is committed to working together to uphold the protection measures that consumers have come to rely on. This completes my opening statement, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you
very much, Ms. Robertson. And Mr. LaFranco, you sure picked an interesting time to come into your new seat.
Agreed.
Interesting and difficult. Okay, we will turn to the first round of questions. And just for members of the committee, I just got an email from Mr. Fraser, who's the parliamentary secretary, and the power is out in that area of international Scotia, of area of Nova Scotia, and the internet is down such that nothing is working. So we'll see if he gets back on. The question order will be then first Mr. Polyev, then Ms. Koutrakis, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Julian. Pierre, you're up. Mr. Polyev, do I see you?
Thank you very much. Yep. Good to be with you. Thank you very much for coming. In 2019, bankruptcies, consumer bankruptcies, were up 9.3%. Other proposals, which can include insolvency or write-downs, were up 17.8%. And that's a year-over-year change from 2018 to 2019. In other words, there was a very large increase in bankruptcies in the lead up to prior to COVID-19. This is not a phenomenon that can be blamed on COVID-19 because it occurred before the very first case of COVID-19 was even discovered in Canada. Do you have any insight into why an increasing number of people were finding themselves in this tenuous position prior to the arrival of COVID-19?
Thank you very much for the question. It is, I think, well understood that there were increasing concerns generally, and certainly our research supports those concerns about the high level of indebtedness of consumers generally, and particularly those consumers that we consider vulnerable. I mentioned in my opening remarks our financial consumers survey that we publish. It's on a 5-year basis, and we published it in fall and certainly in last fall, and certainly the information in that survey corroborated the high levels of indebtedness and the lack of resiliency amongst Canadians consumers. If you'd like more detail on that, Ruth was instrumental in that survey. She could go a little deeper if you would like.
Ms. Stiffen, go ahead. Ruth, your mic's on, Ruth. Your mic's muted.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So results from our 2019 Financial Capabilities Survey indicate that nearly 3/4 of Canadians have some type of debt outstanding or used a payday loan at some point over the previous 12 months. And almost 31% believe that they have too much debt. And so we know that higher debt levels are linked to financial stress. And we've been working hard to inform consumers about how to manage their finances well and continue to collect data on debt.
Thank you, Ms. Stephen. Two questions following up then. One, did you say 19% of Canadians used a payday loan? Did I hear you right?
Nearly 3/4 of Canadians have some type of outstanding debt or used a payday loan. And if you'd like, I can provide you with more specific data on payday loans specifically.
Yes, if you would, that would be very helpful. Do you have that now, or would you like to send it later? Either is fine.
I have that. In terms of the overall population, 2% of Canadians used a payday loan over the previous 12 months, but then you'll see that percentage rising for specific vulnerable subgroups. So for example, low-income households, 4% of low-income households used payday loans, 8% of Indigenous peoples, and 3% of individuals with lower educational attainment, and then 8% of single parents.
All right. And what group of Canadians is most vulnerable to financial crisis like a bankruptcy or an insolvency? Is there a specific income quintile, a specific geography, a specific age group, or a combination thereof that you can highlight?
I could speak to the demographics that are struggling to make ends meet. So based again on our Canadian Financial Capability Survey, persons struggling to meet their financial commitments or falling behind on bill payments are most likely to be under the age of 65, individuals with incomes under $40,000, those who are separated or divorced, Indigenous peoples, and lone parents, single parents. And in terms of individuals who are least confident in their ability to meet unexpected expenses, these were vulnerable populations such as single parents, once again, low-income households, renters, individuals who were aged 55 and under.
Okay.
Okay.
And more specifically then, do you believe that there is a possibility of large-scale bankruptcies and insolvencies right now? Do you believe we could enter we could experience enough bankruptcies and insolvencies that there would be a generalized debt crisis?
I'll take that one. Thanks. Thanks, Ruth. The current situation, of course, is a very difficult one for all Canadians, and particularly difficult for those who had less resilience, less financial resilience to start with. So this is an area of concern for us. We do not have any particular insight into bankruptcies or insolvencies, and our role is not to forecast those things, but we do share the concern about the exposure of these vulnerable groups of Canadians. And what we have been doing has been a number of things, particularly on the education front. So I mentioned that over the course of the first weekend, we pulled together some excellent information about how to respond and react. We are continuing to update that, and we'll use the information we get in our new surveys. We've also been working with the Department of Finance, for example, to increase the amount of a government check that can be cashed at a bank to match the CERB amount, again, to try to avoid going into payday loans. And we've updated our payday loan information in order to give people the information they need to know in order to do the best they can with the resources they have.
Okay, thank you all. Just could Ms. Stefan, could you what's the regular interest rates on payday loans? Do you know?
I don't have that information with me, but I can certainly return to that.
Desperate high. I know that, but I'd love to know what how much they're overcharging. Ms. Robertson?
Yeah, just a quick reference. We did a infographic that's on the Government of Canada website. I don't have the numbers in my head, but it's actually a pretty good picture that translates into an interest rate. So if you wanted to just do governmentofcanada.ca/money payday loan, you'll find it.
Okay, thank you. That's good information to have. Then we'll turn to Ms. Kotrakis, followed by Mr. St. Marie. Annie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, and to our witnesses, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. Can you comment on the impact the pandemic has had on fraudulent behavior and scams against Canadians? Are we seeing an increase in scams?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. We do have a concern about that. We are seeing an increased level in scams. I would guess everyone on this call has had those telephone calls. And so we have, again, embedded alerts against fraudulent behavior on our information and have been working to update information with the Canadian Centre for Anti-Fraud and also with our regulated entities, because this is an area of shared responsibility to try to ensure that consumers are aware and avoid these traps.
Would you say that there's an increase to these scams, and are the scams most prevalent? Are they targeting certain groups? And how would you recommend that the federal government respond if there is?
So I don't have particular information about level or targeting. I would say anecdotally, it would appear as though there has been an increase in these scams, and the response is elsewhere than the FCAC.
Okay.
Except to say that we view it as part of our education mandate to try to, every time we see a scam, to alert consumers to try to forewarn and prepare them.
And also, in order to protect seniors and making banking safer and more secure, we called for the creation of a code of conduct to guide banks and delivery services to seniors. Can you tell us about the code of conduct for the delivery of banking services to seniors?
Sure. It's called this. We call it the Seniors Code. It came into effect. It was agreed last summer, about a year ago now. It was negotiated with the Canadian Bankers Association, and all members of the Canadian Bankers Association have signed on to it. And we do view that as an excellent first step, we would say, in recognizing that there are specialized concerns and issues facing seniors. We also recognize, though, that the code as it's drafted doesn't include everything that people are concerned about, and so we will look to continue working in that area for seniors and other vulnerable consumers over time.
Do I have time for one quick question?
You've got time for two.
Okay, great. How does the financial literacy of Canadians compare to citizens of other G7 countries? And how do you think we might improve the financial literacy, soften the economic impact for future emergencies like COVID-19?
That's such a great question. Thank you so much. It's so comparisons are difficult. We do have one study, an international study, where Canadian 15-year-olds were compared to international. So we have that, and we scored very high. I think Ruth will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were second, tied for second. But I'll say that it's not a very high bar. And so doing well internationally, which that's our impression as we talk to our international colleagues, is probably still quite challenging for us. And where we see us moving is the growing recognition that information is not sufficient. Right? Information is not sufficient. And so we are part of our new initiatives, our experimentation using tools and techniques to change behavior and what is effective for changing behavior. So it's not just knowledge, it's knowledge at the right time, in the right place, the right form, information, but it's also nudges and behavioral changes. So it's quite an exciting time, but also lots for us to learn and experiment with.
And
go ahead, Annie.
Yep. And do you think that after COVID-19, that saving goals for Canadians will or should change? And how do you see the future of financial literacy, and that Canadians should be trying to save more for unforeseen situations?
Well, we certainly do see this as a great example of why you should care about your financial resiliency, and we've described that as having an emergency savings or a cushion, the ability to withstand unexpected shocks. There could be no better example than this, I would say. So it is our hope that if there is a positive that comes out of this experience for all of us, that there is perhaps some learning that happens as a result of that.
Thank you. Thank you all. Just back to my point I raised on payday loans earlier, I'm absolutely shocked that there's 8% of Indigenous and 8% of single parents using payday loans. I never realized it was anywhere near there. And I look on your website, or on that website you mentioned to me, and you basically say payday loans are very expensive compared to other ways of borrowing money. That is because you pay high fees. The cost may be equivalent to an interest rate of 500 or 600%. That's usury. That's ungodly. I know they're legal, but man, we got to do something about that. Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Julian.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just completely agree with your intervention. First of all, though, I would like to greet our witnesses who are here from the FCAC. Thank you for your presentation. It was really very interesting. And I'll go back to Mr. Easter's question. Can you further give us more information about the point that was just brought up by our chairman?
I'd like to just clarify the question, the point about payday loans. Is that the question? Yep. and the interest rate? Yes? Thank you. Thank you. So we share the concern, which is why we have tried to, as graphically as we can, put that information on our website. And it's not just on our website. Of course, we share that through our networks and try to get that information out. So we do not have authority. That's not part of our regulatory authority over payday lenders. They are regulated provincially. However, we do have an interest, as do you, and try to use our educational tools in order to give consumers the information they need. And to make better choices. But the truth is, these businesses exist because they are serving a need.
Okay.
Mr. St. Marie.
Thank you. The act that deals with credit card networks, it comes under your jurisdiction for the exchange rates when you're using a credit card. Can you make that information that deals with this public? After the pandemic, it seems that there's been an explosion of credit card use to avoid physical contact, of course, but because people are buying more online. Have you been able to verify whether this explosion in credit card transactions really does exist? And those transactions mean more costs for the businesses, for the people who are selling the product. Therefore, I would like to know what type of inquiry you have conducted to date, or will you do one in the future?
Thank you very much for the question. Can I just explain first, perhaps, where we fit in the credit card network operators, because it's a complicated area with many parties. So the network operators, like Visa, MasterCard, Interact, also work with individual parties like the merchants, the banks that issue the credit cards, and then, of course, the consumers. So your question is about the relationship and the charges between the merchants and the payment card network operators. And our role in that relationship is governed by a code of conduct, which is principally designed to ensure that there is proper disclosure and information about charges. Okay, so merchants know what they have to pay. So that's just a little background on our role. We do agree and have seen reported the increase in transactions taking place, either debit or credit. That is absolutely valid. We do not know whether that will continue, or whether that's a permanent change or it's a temporary thing, but that is something that we are monitoring.
OK. Merci. Donc, ce que je comprends.
Thank you. So what I draw from that is that there is a code of conduct that obliges MasterCard and Visa to respect their obligations. It would be therefore our duty in the House to pass a new bill dealing with that. But let me make a comparison with Australia or the EU that has charges, interchange charges. Your answer deals with the relationship between the merchants and credit card companies, but there is a dependency that exists when you use a credit card. So we could ask the banks, or we've asked the banks to be more flexible with the users of credit cards during the pandemic, and measures have been put in place. But that act that deals with the network of these credit cards, how does Canada compare with the UK, say, or with Australia in terms of the fees for the utilization of cards?
Okay, I'm going to ask Teresa if she has some information on that as far as the comparison internationally with fees. As I say, we monitor compliance with the code of conduct, as opposed to, we're not a fee setting or a fee regulator. But just before seeing if Teresa has something to add there, I'll just say that the relationship between the bank and the consumer, of course, is governed under the Bank Act with so separate regulations there, which we also monitor, disclosure of the cost of borrowing. So, Teresa, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have any information on international comparison for exchange rates, or is that outside of our purview?
Actually, I know that yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the question. I know that we do have some information on international comparisons. Unfortunately, I don't have that with me right now. I'd be happy to share it with you at a later date, if that's all right.
Okay, Ms. Freck, if you could just send that into the clerk, and she'll distribute it to the committee. Thank you all. Turning then to Mr. Julian, who will be followed by Mr. Kelly. Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for coming forward. We certainly hope your families are safe and healthy, and we appreciate your work on behalf of Canadians. I've got a bunch of questions, so relatively short answers if you could. And of course, the concerns I'm raising are concerns that many people feel across the country. The federal government and its various agencies, we've heard from the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, has supported the banking sector to the tune of close to $700 billion, with an extension up to $750 billion, $750 billion. And yet there's been very little asked of the banking sector, particularly Canada's big banks, that, as we know, just in the first few weeks of the pandemic, have announced profits of $5 billion. And anecdotally, those profits are skyrocketing as the misery of the pandemic continues to afflict Canadians. So my first question to you in that context is, for the banking sector, do you track the administrative monetary penalties that have been levied against the banks over the last quarter or the last year, whatever period you have available?
Are you talking, I'm sorry, just to clarify the question, are you asking what FCAC has levied?
What you are aware of, FCAC or other agencies?
So any administrative monetary penalties that we have levied are available on our website. They are publicly disclosed. I do not have a total to provide you.
Okay. And more specifically, are there any penalties that have been imposed by the Financial Consumer Agency around the practice of redlining? And I know you're aware of it, but for the public that's tuned into the Finance Committee, redlining is a practice that the banks use that they basically exclude a group or exclude a whole community from having access to loans. Often it's in communities that have to, as a result of that, go to the payday loans. And the payday loans we have seen are absolutely scandalous interest charges that make it difficult for people, particularly Indigenous people, particularly single-parent families, ever to get out of the debt load. Is there a list of administrative penalties that have been levied against banks on redlining? And is it your sense that redlining continues as a practice, or are you confident that it is being used less often?
Thank you very much. It's such an interesting area. We would agree that it's an area of concern. I'm not aware of any AMPs being levied as a result of redlining, and this is not an area that has been elevated to us, or it has been, certainly it's on our radar generally, but not something that we have seen evidence of in the recent time. As I say, I've been here since not quite a year.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, as far as the process with external complaints bodies, do you have a sense now of what the average period is for complaint handling from level 1 right through to level 4? We've had complaints in the past at Finance Committee about banks basically ragging the puck and not allowing for consumers to get to the period of an external complaints body. Do you know what the average time is now for the 4 stages of the complaints handling?
So I do not know off the top of my head the average time, but I will say it's too long. And I think that in our industry study we published in February, we were quite clear about that. I'm sorry, I just don't know the time, but we have made it very clear to the banks that it is too long. We view this as an industry problem that requires rectification and attention.
Is that something you could provide to us?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. The information that you've provided around the deferral requests and approvals, I understand these are statistics who come from the big 6 banks themselves, and I note the number of declined deferral requests. If it was put out across the country, it would mean in my riding 7 deferral requests would have been rejected. I can tell you just from people I know of and constituents, it's far more than that in New Westminster Burnaby alone. So I'm wondering if there's a bit of a filtering process going on. Are the banks are providing these numbers around mortgage deferrals, but are they also including people that have been discouraged for applying or who haven't completed the deferral process because banks have already told them that they won't qualify?
Thank you. The data is as good as we can make it, I would say. We have no reason to suspect that it is not accurate. It is reflective of what we see in the traffic at our call center. And we continue to work with the banks to refine the data. What we have shown you is a summary. Of course, we have a lot more granular data behind that. And we also compare our data sets with our other regulatory partners like OFSI. So we are quite confident in the accuracy of the data.
Okay, thank you for this. So you do have
last question, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the more granular data, I would be very interested in knowing how many of these deferrals take place without penalties, without fees, without all of the add-ins that I'm certainly hearing from my constituents banks are imposing. So they're profiting from the deferral. does your granular information reveal what percentage of the deferrals have come without penalties, and what percentage have come with fees, penalties, and compounded interest charges on top of that?
Right. Thank you. I think that's an important point to clarify. So we do probe and have, really almost daily conversations with our regulated entities. And this isn't just the top 6. This is all of our regulated entities that we are collecting data on. The first thing is that it is our information. We are not aware of penalties or fees being charged on deferrals. We would share your concerns about that, but that is not the standard that we have seen applied. There are different methods that different banks are using as far as interest treatment. Some are continuing to charge interest during the deferral period. Others are rebating that interest collection. Our focus has been on ensuring that the disclosure banks are making to their consumers is accurate. So both initially, and then we've asked them to go back now that the dust has settled on the first wave, to ensure consumers really understand what they are getting, what they have agreed to, and what all of the costs are.
Okay, thank you all. We'll turn then to a 5-minute rounds, starting with Mr. Kelly, followed by Mr. Sabera.
Okay, thank you. So on the deferral program, based on the data here, the overwhelming majority, it seems, of those that have applied are receiving deferral, according to the chart that you've had. The numbers are quite extraordinary. We've heard testimony at this committee about the effect that mortgage deferral may have and eventual default may have on the health of the real estate market. Are you concerned overall about the deferral of all of these different types of consumer credit? How that will eventually work itself out? We know that insolvencies had hit we're approaching sort of 10-year records before the pandemic hit. Now debt or payment obligations are being deferred, but this is going to catch up at some point. Is there a concern about what is around the corner as these deferred debts pile up?
Yes, thank you very much. We do have a concern. Sorry, I hope I'm still.
Yep,
we can hear you.
Yeah. My screen just went blank, so I wanted to just double check. So yes, we do have a concern about the unwind of all of these provisions, and that goes back to our focus on communication and disclosure to consumers. So we know that in the first wave of the pandemic, that consumers, even if they weren't affected, they didn't lose a job or something, quite a lot of them opted for deferrals as a bit of an insurance policy. And so we are reiterating to the banks that we expect them to ensure that they are disclosing all of the costs and the potential outcome for consumers, not just initially, but on the way through, and then in particular on the unwind.
That it's interesting. In your new financial consumer protection framework, you specified a prohibition on banks from providing false or misleading information to consumers. I think any business that provides false or misleading information would be committing fraud. Is that why does that specific piece need to be in your framework? If I'd like you to maybe just explain that, and maybe also in the context of the need for clear, transparent disclosure by banks around the programs like the mortgage deferral.
Sure. The false and misleading is actually in the legislation, I believe, or the regs. I may have that wrong. But this is, I think, an appropriate reflection on the complexity of financial products and the difficulty that we are very aware of consumers understanding them. So part of the challenge with financial literacy is the complexity of the products, and we see that over and over again. And that's part of the challenge in ensuring that consumers are informed enough to make the right choices.
Have you noticed or seen a lot of complaints around poor disclosure or non-disclosure around costs of credit related to the deferrals, or is it too early, or do you expect that, or have you seen that already?
So we haven't seen that, but I will ask actually one of my colleagues just to give a little bit more color on that. Frank, would you mind just piping in on our sort of specific activities with relation to the disclosure statements? I'm hoping Frank is still with us.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Okay.
We see him.
Okay.
Thank
great.
you, Commissioner, and thank you, committee, for having me here today. I should note that I've been kicked out of the meeting a couple of times, I think, through the internet problems, but I'm glad I'm connected for this part of the meeting since a question was directed in my way. So I will say that since the onset of the pandemic, the FCAC supervision branch has been in constant contact with the regulated entities and the six banks in particular, the DSIBs, on a daily basis initially, and the frequency of that communication continues. At front and center, we are seized with the requirements for disclosure. There's a lot of information that came out initially that was confusing as entities were trying to adjust to the environment, as were we. But as the weeks have gone by, we have taken the time to interact with those entities, going so far as to look at their training materials, reviewing their scripts, looking at what's been posted on the website to reassure ourselves that disclosures have been made in a way that's appropriate and fair. And to that,
sorry, continue. Yeah.
So the remaining issue is now really tracking the reaction of consumers in relation to these programs, complaints in particular, if you will. I think that's part of your question as well. And we will be getting information in relation to COVID-related complaints toward the fall period. But in the meantime, we continue to remain accessible to all consumers should they have any complaints or concerns that they want to register with us.
We're over time, but do you have an important supplementary there?
Just a really quick comment that I found 5 million consumers filing at least one complaint with a bank every year to be an extraordinarily high number. And that was quite revealing, actually, in your presentation.
Okay, thank you all. We'll go to Mr. Sabero, I believe. I think Mr. Fraser is on, but his internet is wobbly. Mr. Sabero.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Just quickly looking at the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada's 2020-21 business plan. You've put forward a number of responsibilities and also fulfillment targets that you wish to, strategic priorities actually. One of them being a renewal of the National Financial Literacy Campaign, which was expiring in 2019, and so forth. So I wanted to see, my first question is, with COVID-19, how much, or if you've been analyzing what has been disrupted of the business plan, and secondly, we know that financial literacy is a very, very important aspect of everyone's lives here in Canada, here in the province of Ontario. Actually, financial literacy would be brought into beginning with a child's education. It's going to be something in the curriculum, so we know how important it is. How much work has been done on the renewal of the financial literacy campaign, and what can we see of that? And also how much of COVID-19 has impacted the organization?
Thank you very much. I'll take the first one first. So the answer is, of course, it's impacted, but my last discussion around this subject with my executive team is that we have not adjusted our business plan. So that's where I'm saying I'm feeling like super great about how it's going. But we also, I think, need to be realistic that as this goes on, we may have a harder time doing the hiring and so on that we need to do. So for the moment, we're in great shape. As far as the national strategy, we are on track. We have been consulting with our stakeholders. We had a summative evaluation that we are responding to about the last financial literacy, and we have a bit of a draft that is being circulated internally, and we expect to do public consultations on that on August. So we're quite excited about the project, and it is our anticipation that we will be able to release it in November in time for the 10th anniversary of the Financial Literacy Month.
Just to interrupt for a sec, Francesco, just to give Mr. Cumming a heads up, he's next on the question list. I neglected to do that. Go ahead, Mr. Sabera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to follow up, I've gone quickly to the financial, the FCAC website, and I want to say thank you for your team for having the website updated. There's some great resources for Canadians from coast to coast to coast to look at, and especially during this extraordinary period of time. Our government has put in place a number of measures: the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the wage subsidy. My seniors, over 20,000 of them, this week will be receiving $300 old age security, tax-free, one-time payment. If they're collecting the supplement or the allowance, an additional $200. That's on top of the GST, HST credit that they received, which was another several $100s. So we are assisting Canadians to weather this time. We don't want to have people having to choose between paying bills and putting food on their table. We don't want to have people facing that financial hardship. Do this extraordinary and unique period of time. And largely, our government's been applauded for the number of measures that we've taken. And I look forward to continuing as we move out of the recovery, working with all agencies and seeing what all agencies have put up on their website. So the one question is, do you folks or FCAC measure the number of times Canadians have visited the website and looked at the information and to help themselves and to ensure that they know what they need to do to weather this storm as well?
So if I understand the question correctly, thank you. It's do we monitor our traffic to our web pages?
Yes, exactly.
Yes, we do. And we are also active on social media, and we monitor the response and the pickup and so on that as well. And that's an area, honestly, of quite strong interest to us to try to evaluate the effectiveness of what we're doing and ensuring we're devoting our resources in the right places.
Of course. And if I can just finish up, Chair, in terms of the strategic plan, the number of FTEs, there's a big ramp up in terms of in terms of hires. I would think this came from the last session of Parliament, where we did a study on the Financial Consumer Agency, came out with a number of recommendations to strengthen rules to make sure Canadians are protected when they go to a bank and financial institution or a credit union, for that matter, if they're federally regulated. And we came out with a great report. Actually, it was really very, very good to work on it with the current chair with that. And I was just wondering, in terms of the FTE count, in terms of being able to bring in human capital, how is that process going?
Thank you very much. We do have a plan, targeted plan for recruiting. We have a great recruiting story, so we're actually quite able to attract people. It's difficult in these times, as you can imagine, a difficult situation to attract. We are about, as I say, 160 people. Our plan is to grow to about 200 people over the next year, and we're confident that we will get there and that we will have the resources we need.
Okay. Thank you all. Mr. Cummings next, followed by Mr. McLeod. James?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for all the witnesses today. Ms. Robertson, I want to come back to some numbers that I just found very distressing, that the risk of bankruptcy and people being able to pay their bills pre-COVID, and the notion of deferrals. The deferrals are, for the most part, exactly what they are. They're deferrals. And if people have been out of work and they've been struggling before COVID and now they're post-COVID, whether it be a deferral with mortgages or interest payments on mortgages or utility bills or property taxes, which with many communities are done, how concerned are you that these insolvency numbers will skyrocket? Because I just see we're going to hit a fiscal cliff this fall, and I'd like your opinion on that.
Thanks for the question. So of course it's difficult to predict, and our role is we have no specific ability to make predictions of that nature. I think it's fair to reflect that everyone has a concern about the level of indebtedness of Canadian consumers before this shock to the economy, and the uncertainty that has created definitely contributes to the difficulties consumers have been facing.
So the consumers and the piece that you have under financial literacy, I'm quite curious about. So if I read this right, that the agency has increased its funding significantly, something like 40% between 2014-15 to 18-19, and there's another planned increase of 65% by 22-23. Can you tell us where those funds are targeted, and is it predominantly around financial literacy?
Thank you. So yes, the percentage increases have been high, but our total budget for last fiscal was less than 35 million, or our total spend for last fiscal is less than 40 million, and we are staying within our anticipated budget for this fiscal. So we're trying to be responsible stewards of our resources. As far as the division of our spend, we don't specify financial literacy per se, but we have two principal divisions, our supervision and enforcement division and our research, policy, and education division. And we use the tools from both sides to increase the information and financial education of consumers.
So given what we know about the consumers and the increase in debt and their debt load, and we have this financial literacy program, how will you measure success? If we're going to spend taxpayers' dollars to try and improve this situation, how will you measure success? And I'm wondering, how coordinated are your efforts with the provinces? Because I know for sure most of the provinces have something of the same kind in place, and is there duplication of services?
Thank you very much for that question. So first, just a point of clarification. So our funding is principally from the sectors we regulate. So our only amount of taxpayer funding is a $5 million annual allocation. The rest of our expenses are covered by the industry. Second, as far as how we measure success, this is where our research comes in. So we have the benchmarks, we measure changes, we are using experimentation to see if behaviors are changing. And I can give you a couple of examples on those if you're interested. And then as far as relationship with the provincial regulators, this is an area of a great interest to me. We have very fruitful relationships with provincial regulators, and we do share resources and find areas of overlap where we can rationalize resources, but also find areas where we can amplify each other's message. So we're very active in that area.
Great. So we could have a great conversation about industry where you say industry's paying, while ultimately they're building into their pricing. So I would tell you that the taxpayers still pay. So it's still a cost to them. I'll leave. My last question would be, it just strikes me that much of what we're doing with financial literacy is reactive to a situation that we're currently in or pre-COVID. How much of an emphasis will your group put towards trying to intervene earlier and trying to assist provinces and assist other sectors with being in front of the curve, so when people get out into the working world, they realize that debt isn't necessarily a good thing?
Great, thank you very much. We couldn't agree more that moving ahead of the problem as opposed to trying to fix a problem is the right way to go. So just a couple of things. First, one of our targeted areas is youth, students, right? So again, trying to make sure that good financial habits are built early. Second, I'll just highlight two of our, I would say, more experimental resources. One is something we call a budget planner, which was released last fall, that has had great reception, but it's basically a very simple budgeting tool that people can use, totally free, that helps people get into the habit of planning and building a resilient financial future. And then the third one is a pilot program we're running now based on a program in the US called Refund to Savings, which is trying to nudge taxpayers who are getting a refund to put that refund directly into a savings vehicle. Because research shows that once it's in a savings vehicle, as opposed to, your regular account, it tends to stay there, and it's a bit of a free money way to build that emergency cushion. So those are the kinds of things that we're quite excited about.
Okay, thank you all. We'll go to Mr. McLeod and then on to Mr. St. Marie. Mr. McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters today and everybody for their questions. Very interesting discussion. The COVID-19 has certainly changed our world in a short period of time, and especially for the people that are financially very fragile in their situation. And I think our federal government has done a really good job, along with the government, Northwest Territories, and in our communities, the band councils and Métis locals and friendship centers and food banks, all have really made sure that our people are okay. We live in an area in the north where there's a high cost of living, and food security has always been something that concerned us. But I'm curious if I could ask a question about how, if and how the COVID-19 has affected the financial protection of the potentially vulnerable consumer population, such as the elders, the seniors, and people in the remote communities. These people are the ones that may have difficulty accessing financial institutions in their community. For the most part, I know in the north we don't have a lot of banks, and they may not be able to securely or may not be able to do it comfortably access online banking. That's my first question.
Thank you very much for that. We share that concern, and that's something we recognized early on. In fact, as part of the research we did leading up to the Seniors Code, we did a survey of banking practices, banking habits by different segments of the population. And that gave us insight into who uses bank branches, right? Or who doesn't use digital banking. And that information was very helpful in us reacting quickly to COVID when we realized bank branches needed to be shut down, of course, for the health and safety of the bank employees. We communicated both with the Department of Finance, but also with the regulated entities, saying, so, we understand you need to protect your employees, but you also need to provide services. And here are the groups that we're concerned about, because we know these are the ones who are most dependent. And you're right, and our seniors or people who don't have access to reliable internet or who don't have access to the computer hardware. that is required for digital banking. So we're actually we were well, pleased maybe too strong because we're never pleased, but we do recognize that banks did take action to provide alternative forms of service. So in terms of telephone banking, obviously not perfect, but then they did things like specific hours for seniors and vulnerable people. One did a jump the line. Anyway, so they definitely did try to find ways to bridge this this problem that unfortunately disproportionately affected certain segments of the population.
I'm also very curious when you talked about the financial consumer trends and the survey that you've done, and I asked this question to everybody that talks about trying to assess what people are doing in terms of habits and all kinds of measures that we seem to want to track, but it never seems to include the North. Does your survey include the Northwest Territories or Nunavut? We really have a hard time getting information to, and a lot of times this is very important information that everybody else in the country is using to make decisions and base their decisions on. So do you do some of your work in the Northwest Territories?
Great. So I'm going to let Ruth respond specifically on the surveys if she has that. But I'll just say though that in addition to surveys, I mentioned that we have this large stakeholder network that we use because we recognize that it's the local community organizations that really have their pulse. And we do have community networks in the North. There's a financial literacy network located in Whitehorse that's part of our group. And so at the beginning of the crisis, one of the things we did was we sort of did an ad hoc call around and brought people together saying, what are the problems? What are the issues? And we continue to do that. So that's a little bit more informal, a little more ad hoc, but it does happen and is tremendously effective. Ruth, I don't know if you wanted to mention as far as our more formal research, our ability to have granular down to a regional or a provincial level.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. So we do oversample target populations in order to identify challenges for vulnerable groups. So that is a regular way that we collect research data. Sometimes it's difficult because of small population size, but we do tend to oversample so that we have enough incidences to be able to have results.
Does that mean you sample the North, or you just sample other parts of the country and use it to try to?
No, we do collect provincial data and territorial data, but sometimes we have to aggregate it on a regional basis. But in terms of specific vulnerable subgroups, we will tend to oversample, for example, rural Canadians or Indigenous communities so that we have enough to report on specific target segments.
Yeah, I just have one more question, and it's regarding the payday loans. It's really surprising to see that the numbers are increasing for the use of the payday loans. I know the service that moved into the Northwest Territories was something that we've seen a lot of resistance, but it still happened, and the service is only available in the capital city of the NBT. So I would be really curious as to if that's happening here in the Northwest Territories, because the people that are using these loans are the ones that are falling between the cracks and ending up in the cities, and they're the least able to afford it actually. But I'm curious how these companies collect. If the people that borrow default, how do they collect? They can't be. Most people don't have the security to, or even a promissory note. What do they do? I don't know if you'd be able to answer that, but I'm very curious to see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I cannot answer that question. That's a level of operational detail on their business that I just don't know.
Yeah, thank you all. I think you're seeing some of the committee members' concern on this particular issue. So we'll go to a question from Mr. St. Marie, then Mr. Julian, and then we'll go to a 5-minute round with Mr. Cooper and Mr. Fragascatis each. Gabriel.
Oui, merci Wayne.
Thank you, Wayne. Ms. Robertson, in your presentation, you said that you worked in good cooperation with the provinces. And in Quebec, we have the Office of Consumer Protection. I'd like to know if you could give us a bit more detail how you work with what we have in Quebec, the Office of Consumer Protection. And I'd ask the same question as concerns the Mouvement Desjardins. What is your relation with Mouvement Desjardins in Quebec? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. So maybe an example is a good way. I introduced myself to the head of the Office de la Protection des Consommateurs when I first joined. And then actually, as a result of COVID, we had occasion to communicate around credit ratings. So this is a serious issue, of course, that we were very concerned about. We made it clear to our regulated entities that any deferrals or skip payments should not negatively affect the credit standing of the consumer. But we have no regulatory authority over the credit agencies. And so I did some outreach, again, back to the Office de la Protection des Consommateurs, as also with the AMF. And we had a very engaging discussion where we agreed on that we were aligned in our concern, and we were able to share our knowledge, and they understood what we were doing with our regulated entities, and we understood what they were doing. So that's a good example of where our jurisdictions touch, don't overlap, but it's important that one side knows what the other side is doing. Is that a fair example?
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Oui, merci. Il y aurait eu aussi Desjardins, mais...
Yes, there was also Desjardins that I was wanting, but I can perhaps ask later.
And now, Gabriel, if you want to ask it, because we'll soon run out of time. Go ahead.
Okay, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Your relations with the Mouvement Desjardins, what did you do with them?
So we do not regulate Desjardins as a financial entity, although we are interested, of course, because quite often they show a leadership in things related to consumers. So we are quite keen. We meet with them from time to time to make sure we're exchanging information. The only official intersection we have is on the credit card side.
Okay, thank you all. Mr. Julian, followed by Mr. Cooper, and then Mr. Fragascatis. Peter?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to dovetail two questions together. You mentioned earlier about having the granular information around banking, and I would like to ask you to share that information with the committee. And you mentioned that there are some financial institutions that aren't leveling penalties and fees. It would be very useful, I think, for this committee to know who is doing that. I'm also interested in knowing on things like lines of credit. Community Savings Credit Union in New Westminster, BC has offered 0% on lines of credit because of the pandemic. Are other banks doing that on credit cards? Van City Community Savings, largest credit union in the country, has offered 0% on credit cards. To what extent do you have that information granular available to us so we can actually determine if there are any banks that are following best practices. And then in terms of payday loans, does the FCAC have a position on a publicly owned banking institution like a postal banking system so that those communities can actually get service from a banking sector rather than being redlined? Thank you.
Great, thanks very much for that. So I think it's probably best for me to commit to provide you with that information that you requested, the more granular information and the differentiation amongst the various banks. As far as the credit card interest on outstanding balances, there is some difference amongst the banks, that some have dropped, or I'd say most have dropped to half of their normal rate, so just under 11%. But to my knowledge, no banks have gone as far as Vancity to zero. And then related to your question on payday lending, we have not engaged in any research on potential solutions as you suggest, so I don't have anything to offer there. Thank you.
Okay, we will have to move on, and you can provide that information, Ms. Robertson, to the clerk, and we'll get it to committee members. We'll split the remaining time, 4 minutes apiece, to first with Mr. Cooper, and to wrap it up, Mr. Fragaskatis. Michael.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I have a few questions just arising from your bank complaint handling procedures report. And I note at page 15 of the report, it notes that of the 4 steps in terms of escalating complaints, that the first step, which is really the first point of contact typically in a financial institution, that 90% of complainants who are not satisfied with the resolution, or where it's not resolved, don't advance it any further. That seems awfully high. Why do you think that is? Your report says it suggests it's not straightforward or easy for consumers to escalate complaints, but could you elaborate on exactly what the issues are? Because that seems very high.
Yeah, so we would agree with you that is high, and it is a concern. I will point out, in fairness, that 3/4 of complaints are dealt with successfully, and the definition of success in the legislation is to the satisfaction of the consumer. So that is a very high success rate for any retail operation. But we are very concerned about the challenges faced by consumers if they are not satisfied. We identified many issues in the report, which is first, lack of knowledge on their ability and their rights to escalate. Second, the onus being placed on consumers to navigate these systems. And then third, delays and lack of assistance on the part of the banks. I think those are the main ones.
Good. Thanks for that.
Go ahead, Michael.
More time? Okay. Thank you, Chair. In your report, you looked at some other jurisdictions, including Australia, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Netherlands. And the standard in Canada in terms of resolution of complaints is 90 days. You note that out of the 6 banks, that standard is not being met. In some cases, it's not being met on average by quite a significant number of additional days, double the time or more in terms of an average. But you note that, or your report notes that the 90-day standard is double that of Australia, double that of the United Kingdom, and that excludes, for the counting of the 90-day period, the first step, whereas the first step is typically included in some of those other comparator jurisdictions. What about the Netherlands and the United States? How do we compare in that regard?
Oh, Sorry, I was prepared to answer a different question.
Oh, okay. Well,
no, I'm sorry. I honestly do not know. Netherlands,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we'd certainly be able to provide that information to you. But you know, 2 points if you might. So first of all, those results are, you know, not satisfactory. They're very concerning, and these are issues I have raised at the most senior levels of the banks in the strongest possible ways. I will say, though, that of course our report deals with a point in time. We would say if we were to do the report again based on current, we would expect to see improvements because banks have been paying attention to this. But it is important that they do so because we anticipate, as following every crisis, there is a wave of complaints. So it's very critical that the industry get their complaint handling processes in order so that consumers can be treated fairly. Thank you.
Fair enough.
We'll have to move on, Michael.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Fragiscatis, 4 minutes to wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Robertson. Very important information, particularly on payday loans. I'm not going to focus on that specifically. My colleagues have done a great job in helping raise key questions. But I just want a confirmation from you that payday loans, matters relating to them, including most importantly how they operate and all the way down to the rates of interest, those issues are regulated provincially, first and foremost, and to an extent, depending on the province, at the municipal level through bylaws. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. At the federal level, is there any regulatory role or not?
Hard for me to be completely categoric, but certainly the FCAC plays no role.
Okay. I also wanted to ask about financial literacy, since this is one of the main focuses of the agency. What does financial literacy mean in 2020 from your perspective? That's a term that's thrown around and has been thrown around for many years. But financial literacy, and I know you've made a specific focus, young people, helping them become financially literate. I can tell you that when I was in high school in the late 1990s and early 2000s, financial literacy meant something entirely different. When the good teachers at South Huron District High School helped me understand, as a grade 9 student, I think, or something like that, how to write a check, that qualified then in 1996 as an example of being financially literate. In 2020, matters are. It's just a whole different ballgame. Can you give the committee an understanding of what financial literacy means today from your perspective and the perspective, obviously, of the agency?
Thank you very much. So it's a good question. So we define financial literacy as the knowledge, skills, and confidence to manage your financial affairs appropriately. But of course, that will mean different things at different stages of your life. And your example is actually not that far off, because while it would be, I think, rare for anyone to teach someone how to write a check these days, it actually is appropriate for people to teach young people how to pay a bill online, right? Or how to set, right? How to manage their password information to keep their account secure. These are things that we as adults and sophisticated adults take for granted, but they do need their skills and they do need to be taught.
Final question, Peter.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Robertson. With a final question, I would just ask, in terms of financial literacy, what are the key points of focus for you and the agency going forward in the next few years? What issues do you think will be of paramount importance, and in what ways might those issues involve COVID-19 and the economic response that's in motion and will certainly continue?
Sure. Thinking about the two sides of our mandates, certainly the economic uncertainty and the economic stress created by COVID-19 puts even more importance on our ability to assist Canadians in managing their financial affairs, so with the knowledge and experience. So certainly what we're doing, and as I mentioned before, trying to shift from just awareness to actual tools and proactive behaviors seems to me to be on the right track. So that's definitely a thrust. As far as on the supervisory regulatory side, we have a full suite of priority areas to ensure that we are putting into effect the changes from the consumer protection framework so that consumers get the benefit of the protections embedded in the legislation. So we got a full plate.
Okay, with that, we will have to wrap it up. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank you, Ms. Robertson, and the other witnesses who came with you today, but also your whole team at Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. These are strange and startling times, and they're creating scenarios that I don't think many have expected to see in life, and with people working from home. You have an important job to do, especially with the amount of money going out of the system, the loans that are coming through the banks, etc. So you have important work to do. So we thank you for the work that you do, and for your appearance here today. All the best.
Thank you very much.
With that, we will suspend for about 3 minutes to bring up the next witness, which will be with the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. So meeting suspended for 3. And for this 2-hour session, we'll be meeting with the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, Miss Elizabeth Lang, Superintendent. Before I turn to you, Miss Lang, we'll officially call the meeting to order. I guess we better do that, or we won't be on the public system. And just for your information, Ms. Lang, we are meeting, as you know, on COVID-19 pandemic, government response to that, and the meeting will be taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available on the via the House of Commons website. Before we get into your presentation, just for those that are on the steering committee, which is Peter Fragiskatis, Mr. St. Marie, Mr. Julian, and Mr. Polyev, is anybody out of position that they can't do a steering committee meeting this Thursday at 3 o'clock Ottawa time? We'd like to call that as quickly as possible so that it'll give the clerk and staff enough time to get witnesses. If we're going to have 4 3-hour meetings before the end of July, we'll have to get on it pretty fast. So I see Gabriel come on there. You okay? You're okay with that, Gabriel?
Sounds good, Mr. Chair. That's fine
Peter's
for me.
okay. I don't see Mr. Polyev or Mr. Julian.
Yeah, that should work.
Okay.
Polyev here.
Okay, all right. Then we'll just worry. I know Peter's in Ottawa, as long as he's not on a plane or something at that time. So okay, we'll try for 3.
Mr. Chair, I have to know his plane is towards the evening, so I can't speak for him. But at least I don't think.
Okay, he shouldn't be on one at 3 o'clock Ottawa time. Thanks, Elizabeth. All right. With that, we will go ahead with that timing, Carolyn. Then welcome, Ms. Lang, with the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy. I believe you have an opening statement, and then we'll go to a round of questions. Welcome, and thank you for coming. And your mic is muted, Ms. Lang.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
It seems to get muted on its own. So thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. I will deliver my remarks in English in order to avoid any technical difficulties, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions posed in either English or French. I do want to express my thanks to each of you on this committee for the important work that you do on behalf of Canadians. And I also want to say I hope you and your families are staying safe and healthy. Today, I'll cover 3 topics. I'll start by providing information about the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy, which I'll refer to as the OSB, and the Canadian insolvency system. As I highlight some of OSB's programs, I'll provide you with an overview of the steps that the OSB has taken in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll then address how OSB is preparing for a possible increase in the number of insolvency filings. Prior to appearing today, I provided a deck with information about the OSB and data on insolvency filings in Canada, and I don't intend to walk you through that, but happy to answer any questions about it that you may have. A well-functioning insolvency system is a key pillar of the economy. It helps to promote investor and creditor confidence in the Canadian marketplace. As superintendent, a governor and council appointee, I have statutory duties and authorities that help to ensure that the Canadian insolvency system continues to operate as intended, as set out in the material I provided.
Ms. Lang, I might just interrupt for a sec. I might ask you to slow down a little bit. The translation is even more difficult over the video conference, so the people in the booths might be having a little trouble. Just slow down a little.
I will try. It's a hard habit to break, apparently. So the OSB is a part of the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Department, and the Ministry of Industry. It has responsibility for insolvency policy via legislation and regulations. As superintendent, I work closely with my ISED colleagues, and I also have directive-making power that enables me to provide additional guidance on the legal requirements of the BIA. As mentioned in the materials, the OSB is predominantly a VoteNet organization. OSB revenues cover all direct costs of the operation, as well as indirect costs for various centrally managed expenditures. In addition to the OSB, the key players in the insolvency system include licensed insolvency trustees, debtors, creditors, and the courts. Licensed insolvency trustees, which I call LITs, are private sector individuals and corporations who are the only professionals authorized to administer insolvency proceedings that allow debtors to be discharged from their debt. LITs go through a thorough training and certification process before being licensed by my office. They must adhere to standards of practice set out in the BIA, CCAA, regulations, including a code of ethics for trustees and superintendent's directives. Debtors have rights and responsibilities in the insolvency system, including complete and honest disclosure of their assets and liabilities and cooperation throughout the process. In the case of consumer debtors, they must participate in 2 insolvency counseling sessions. Debtors can be subject to consequences if they fail to fulfill their duties, such as a refused discharge or an order to pay additional amounts to creditors, or even in the most serious cases, criminal charges. Most debtors, however, are honest and cooperate fully, and upon their discharge can benefit from a fresh financial start. Creditors also have rights and responsibilities in the insolvency system. They are entitled to receive a portion of the amounts collected from the debtor. They have a role to play in the insolvency proceeding. They must respect the stay of proceedings and cannot attempt to collect debts that have been discharged. Courts play an important role, which varies depending on the type of insolvency proceeding. Legislative changes in 2009 provided additional automatic discharges for certain bankruptcy types, which reduced the need for court involvement in the majority of bankruptcy proceedings. So turning now to some of OSB's programs and the steps we've taken to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Since my appointment as superintendent in October of 2018, I established 3 strategic objectives for the OSB, including engagement with stakeholders, compliance, and organizational excellence. In large part, thanks to OSB's increased engagement with stakeholders, including the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals, also known as CARP, and LITs across Canada, OSB was able to act quickly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic by issuing our first guidance note on March 13th, 2020. We immediately enabled LITs to carry out certain duties remotely that they would typically have had to carry out in person, including the initial debtor assessment and insolvency counseling. We have since extended this flexibility to March 31st, 2021, in order to support social distancing, help debtors receive services their preferred way, leverage technology, and provide important efficiencies to the system. Since March 13th, 2020, OSB has issued at least 10 guidance notes, as well as several on behalf of CRA and Revenue Quebec, all of which help to ensure the system can operate effectively and efficiently. We have sought to lighten compliance requirements where appropriate, and have embraced technology and other efficiencies. And perhaps most significantly, using my authority pursuant to the BIA, I applied for an order on behalf of more than 451,000 open insolvency estates, as well as those filed by June 30th in all 13 provinces and territories, effective April 27th, 2020, which allowed consumer proposal debtors to miss an additional 3 payments between March 13th, 2020 and December 31st, 2020, without having their proposal deemed annulled, in recognition of the fact that many consumer proposal debtors found themselves out of work and unable to maintain the promised levels of payments. Note that missed payments would need to be made up at some point prior to the completion of the consumer proposal. The order also allowed for the extension of timelines where necessary for things such as meetings of creditors, applying to court, and mediations. OSB officers across the country reached out to LITs in the early weeks of the pandemic to check in and to ensure they could operate effectively. OSB also created a dedicated email box and COVID response team to reply accurately, consistently, and in a timely manner to all COVID-related questions from LIT and Canadian stakeholders. We're continuing to explore ways to leverage technology to effectively carry out our compliance duties at a distance, including inspections of LIT practices, debtor examinations, chairing meeting of creditors, opposing discharges, and conducting criminal investigations, as well as using electronic signatures and enabling electronic fund transfers. We've also put an emphasis on ensuring that debtors have accurate and reliable information on the options available to them to address their financial difficulties. Last year, we launched a debt solutions portal on our website, which we promoted with the help of partners, including the FCAC. We issued a guidance note directed at debtors in the context of COVID-19 and developed a series of COVID-19 related social media posts to be published throughout the summer. This year, the OSB launched a map-enabled feature to help debtors find an LIT in their area. And in the coming year, we hope to develop new interactive tools to help Canadians find the best debt solutions for their debt challenges. In terms of readiness for a possible increase in insolvency filings, we start by looking back at prior years and the past weeks. We are keeping a very close eye on insolvency rates compared to the last significant Canadian recession in 2008-09, which impacted insolvency rates with a record high of over 158,000 filings, or 5.83 filings per 1,000 adults in that year. So that was in 2009, sorry. In 2019, raw numbers of insolvency filings reached more than 140,000, but note that Canada's population has also grown over time, such that this was equivalent of 4.64 filings per 1,000 adults, a rate which has been relatively stable since 2011, where it has remained under 5 following the effects of the recession. In the weeks following the onset of COVID-19 in Canada, BIA insolvency rates dropped below both 2009 and 2019 rates. For business insolvencies, this drop appeared in the week of March 8th, and on the consumer side, it appeared in the week of March 15th. And the rates have remained well below 2009 and 2019 levels on the BIA side since then. We can surmise with a fair amount of confidence as to why insolvency rates have remained low, and I think we attribute it to financial and liquidity supports from government, reduced levels of enforcement by creditors, uncertainty regarding the future for businesses and employees. On the CCAA side, I would note that we have received 27 CCAA filings. These are the largest insolvency filings in Canada in Q2. And this is more than double the 10-year quarterly average. The next highest quarterly filing rate was 17 in Q1 of 2012. But I would note that in some years, we see a spike in one quarter, followed by a significant drop in others. So it's too soon to tell if this is a sign of a record year. And also note that the numbers are very small across the board. It's important to emphasize that insolvency is a lagging indicator. And in the materials I provided, you can see on slide 8 the correlation between insolvency rates and drops in the gross domestic product, with an increase in insolvency filings occurring when the GDP goes down or in the quarter following a drop in the GDP. Decisions to make a formal insolvency filing are complex, and we know that individuals and businesses who may be technically insolvent will not always file a formal proceedings. Future insolvency rates will be impacted by a multitude of factors. The OSB has not historically been in the business of forecasting insolvency rates. We have a model to forecast revenues, which is very reliable because the majority of fees are paid at the end of an insolvency proceeding, so we base our forecast on current filing data rather than forecasted filing data. We've been in discussions with colleagues both in Canada and internationally to determine if there is a reliable forecasting model and how well it could be applied in the context of the current uncertainties, and work is continuing on that. In the meantime, the OSB is preparing to ensure that the insolvency system can handle a significant increase in insolvency filings. Based on experience from 2009 and additional efficiencies that have been adopted in the insolvency system, I'm confident that the system can handle it. Specifically, I would point to the fact that insolvencies are filed electronically with the OSB, and we have verified that the system could handle significant spikes in 2009, and we're also testing it to ensure it can handle even more. We've extended remote service delivery options to LITs, and the OSB will provide additional efficiencies. LITs have also found efficiencies over the years in how they deliver services, and we can make some strategic adjustments to compliance requirements. And as well, as I mentioned, we have reduced court time given an increased number of files that can obtain an automatic discharge. And as well, due to the increased number of consumer proposals that are filed. We continue to explore other system efficiencies, such as the use of artificial intelligence for detection of potential debtor non-compliance, which we'll be piloting this fall. So that would conclude my remarks for now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lang. The question first round will be Mr. Polyev, Ms. Zerowitz, Mr. St. Marie, and Mr. Julian. So we'll go to a 6-minute round. Mr. Polyev, you're up.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lang. I appreciate your hard work in this difficult time. Obviously, bankruptcies have basically been frozen throughout the COVID period because of the deferral of taxes, mortgage payments, and an inflow, a sudden but temporary inflow of government assistance that will temporarily get people through this rough patch. But in the period leading up to the COVID shutdown, there was a very large increase in insolvencies, particularly 2018 to 2019, and then January of 2019 through to January of 2020. We saw large increases in insolvencies through those times. So a lot of people were clearly suffering. When the temporary measures of deferred mortgages and taxes and the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit lapse, when all of this lapses, do you have a sense of whether or not there could be a large number of Canadians facing a very real likelihood of bankruptcy, an inordinate spike, or maybe even a bankruptcy crisis in Canada?
So as I mentioned, the 2019 rates were actually fairly stable, just up slightly, but still under the 5 per 1,000 Canadians because our population has grown. But on the other hand, of course, we know that the household debt income, the debt ratio has grown significantly over the past number of years. And that's a very real concern for us. However, you don't see every single person that might on paper need to file for an insolvency. It's a multifactorial decision. And one, question that will remain is whether Canadians will be able to get their jobs back, whether creditors will continue to be reasonable given the extreme circumstances that everybody's facing. So, if as many are suggesting, we face a recession and our GDP goes down, then I think that our historical data shows that yes, we will see an increase. I don't think it will be sudden, personally, and I'm not sure it will be a crisis, but it's very difficult to predict.
During the currently, Canadians households have about $1.76 in debt for every dollar of disposable income, which is a record high for Canada. It's actually higher than was the case in the United States in the lead up to the great financial crisis there. In that context, though, the household debt was concentrated among people who had subprime mortgages and other exotic lending products. So in other words, the population as a whole was not exceptionally indebted, but there was a concentrated group of people with a very particular set of circumstances who did have high levels of debt. So my question for you is whether there is a particular group or cohort of Canadians who have inordinately high debts that are particularly vulnerable to an eventual rise in interest rates or unemployment.
So we are able to speak to insolvency statistics, and I think you're asking about a group that is not yet filed. Okay. So it would be difficult for us to speak to that. I mean, the majority of filings, 37% of filings, are done by people ages 35 to 49. I can tell you that for 2019 data. But yeah, it's difficult to talk about. I think others would have to speak to the vulnerabilities of the pre-filing group.
And have you, this group of people who are 35 to 49 years old, are they filing in unusually high numbers these days, or are they typically above the average for insolvency filings?
I would have to look back, but I believe that is the typical age of majority for the group of filings, that it's typically higher in the 35 to 49 bracket than other age groups.
And when I know that your role starts when the filing actually begins, but I imagine you do some anticipation and some planning, and have some data to predict what's ahead. Do you have any sense that bankruptcies and insolvencies could become a real pandemic, so to speak, in the next several years, given the enormous amount of debt that people have racked up in the lead up to COVID-19 and perhaps while it's been going on?
No, as I said, we don't actually have a forecasting model. We're talking to colleagues to see if one exists. I think even if one existed, it might be truly tested by the current situation, which is more uncertain and has more variables than we would have ever seen before, with things like government supports and creditor forbearance. So what we do is we look at the GDP, and we listen to experts who say that we may be facing a recession, and we prepare for the possibility of an increase.
Okay. And so you don't have any predictive modeling that could help us anticipate what's ahead?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Polyev. Ms. Zerowitz, followed by Mr. St. Marie. Julie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Lang. Thank you for your excellent presentation. You covered a lot of territory very quickly, and thank you so much for your service to our nation. I know that we've been, and we've mentioned this a few times in different ways about the impact of the COVID-19 programs on the consumer and business insolvencies, but do you actually have numbers? Like, are you actually able to say, CERB actually stopped X amount of insolvencies, and the wage subsidy do you actually delve down, or do you just say, in general, this is what we understand to have happened?
We know that, based on our statistics that we report monthly on our website, we know that the numbers are down by about 50% this May versus last May. So that would be one number you could look at. However, what you don't know is what they would have been.
Okay. And we're not able to say this program had more of an impact than another program. You're just able to give sort of the overall bucket.
Yeah.
Okay. That's helpful. And have you noticed any deviations from the norm? So for example, I live in downtown West Toronto. There is a natural turnover of businesses within different sectors here. Have you started noticing deviations from the norm in different sectors and different areas?
No, we have not as of yet.
Okay. And are you actually measuring that?
So our statistics on our website report on insolvencies by sector. So you can see that data. But again, because the numbers are so small, and in fact, business numbers have been on the decline for a number of years now. So we're talking about very, very small numbers. It's hard to read a lot into that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's helpful. Now, I think that there's always going to be comparisons between sort of where are we at in terms of insolvencies and bankruptcies here in Canada versus the US versus other G7 countries. Do you have an idea of that at this moment?
Well, I've reached out to my some of my international colleagues very early on to talk about trends that they were seeing and best practices in dealing with COVID-19 and beyond. And I don't have actual stats, but to a country that participated in my call, everybody was experiencing a significant drop in insolvency rates.
Okay. Well, and is it for similar reasons that you had mentioned? Because it wasn't just programs. I think it was debtors not really going after, and sort of going after the money. There was a number of different reasons. Are they for the same reasons as well?
As far as I know, yeah, we didn't delve into the details about why.
Okay. And then did you, I'm assuming that there's also a way that your office actually monitors the policies and procedural decisions of comparable organizations in other jurisdictions and what measures they're putting into place or starting to prepare for. Is there can you maybe talk a little bit to that, if there's anything that you notice, if there's some policy that's being put into place, if there's things that you're thinking about that we need to be looking at?
So on the policy side, that would be largely the responsibility of my colleagues at ISED, but my office has been tracking the legislative changes that have been occurring in some countries. Now, I should note that most countries have slight variations in their insolvency system, so it's hard to make direct comparisons. And I think that the number one change that would be applicable in Canada would be suspension of timelines, because insolvency legislation typically has you required to do certain things at certain times. And the suspension of those timelines in recognition of the fact that people were temporarily laid off or courts were temporarily closed was probably the number one thing that would jump out at me. Now, the OSB was able to provide guidance to our stakeholders to address most of these issues and challenges. And the courts have also been remarkably able to address the needs out there as well. So Canada has fared quite well in spite of some of the challenges.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. My other question is, and I think, again, this was alluded to, I think there's always a concern as you're starting to lift some of the measures that we have in place and what's going to be the impact around bankruptcies or personal insolvencies. One of the things that you had mentioned is that there will be an increase of activity, but you don't think it will be sudden. And why don't you think it will be sort of automatic? Do you think it'll take a certain period of time?
It seems to me, based on what we see from debtor behavior, that a lot of debtors try to do everything they possibly can before they decide to file for an insolvency. We have some excellent and reputable credit counselors in Canada that are provincially regulated that can sometimes help somebody through budgetary problems and see them out the other side without having to file an insolvency. And in some cases, people will just avoid the inevitable and not necessarily in the most healthy way. It's a very stressful situation for people. And in some cases, we wish that they would come sooner. And those are some of the tools that we want to put on our website this year to help people understand in which category do I fall? Where should I go for help? And so that they can go and get that help as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. And just on that, do you only offer that information in English and in French?
We offer it in English and French for a lot of our products, but we have a consumed by debt brochure that we have translated into, and I won't get the number right, but I feel like I'll throw out 13 languages, give or take.
Yeah, I think that's important. Okay, well, thank you for that, and thanks for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Right down to the second, Julie, you got it timed. Mr. St. Marie, followed by Mr. Julian.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Lang, thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon and for your excellent presentation. I want to tip the hat to the interpreters who actually stuck by you hard and fast and got through it admirably. My question also bears on statistics that you've shared with us, which are, by goodness, very surprising. I'm referring to statistics on insolvability in Canada, insolvencies in Canada. And with this pandemic, I would have expected that the number of bankruptcies would have increased. As you said, the total number of files deposited and consumer proposals has gone down by 8.2% compared to the previous month. The number of bankruptcies, 3.2% approximately, you said. The total number of bankruptcy cases diminished by 54+% compared to 2019. Well, that's a lot less. And we are, in fact, facing a financial crisis right now, or economic crisis at least. And you said if you were to compare with Quebec and elsewhere, 40% reduction, and so on and so forth. I have perhaps a couple of theories to explain that, and I'd like to have your reaction to that. I don't know if you have all the answers, but our researchers at Library of Parliament have proposed that it might be because of a slowdown in court procedures. Do you feel that that is a significant factor? Or do you think that the government emergency measures taken because of the pandemic have had an effect? You also mentioned forgiving the first 3 late payments, as it were, but they have to be repaid, of course. If financial institutions have concluded some agreements, temporary measures perhaps, we might be just holding back or slowing down some of these potential bankruptcies in the fall. What's your view on this? Well, thank you for the question. Bankruptcies in Canada are received by our offices electronically, so I don't think that slowdowns in the courts would have much to do with it. Our LITs, even if the process may start in a court, but the courts have been available, quite readily available for the major open files that we have. The other factors that I mentioned, I believe, were more significant. The slowdown in creditors going after their debts, the interventions by government, the CERB and other programs. And I feel that most debtors, I would hope that they get back into their jobs and employment, because we'll have to wait and see. We really don't know. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations for having answered me in French. I appreciate that. Have you been able to obtain preliminary numbers for June? And do you think that this tendency to see a reduction or lower numbers than last year will continue in like manner, or have you not had an opportunity? We are following the statistics very closely and very frequently, and to present, it seems to be a major reduction comparatively to prior months. Well, I'm stunned. I'm stunned by that, and particularly if we take a look at the forecasts on unemployment. Unemployment has shot up incredibly, and we might be stuck with a higher basic unemployment rate than what we had prior to the pandemic. So we have a higher, if the forecasts are good, we'll have higher unemployment, but we'll have lower number of bankruptcies. How do you feel on that? Well, I think that the government programs for financial support have calmed the waters quite a bit. Of course, if unemployment becomes entrenched, we will probably see an increase in the number of bankruptcies and insolvencies. Some American studies have shown that 70%, a bit better than two-thirds, expect to have a sort of a formulaic square root of. We're going to have a lower rate in the American economy as before the pandemic. And that's American, of course. Often, however, we are in tandem with our economy with the Americans. There's special measures been taken in the States, of course, and the exceptional financial supports of government will eventually have to be withdrawn or slowly tailored off. And I think that we can probably expect a certain number of defaults or bankruptcies because of that if we withdraw. Would you agree with that? Yes, it's quite possible. I don't know if you want a recession, depression. It's possible. Well, thank you. That's the end of my questions, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions, and I will give my second turn to Ms. May.
Hey, we'll go to Mr. Julian, who will be followed by Michael Cooper. Peter?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ms. Lang, for your presence here today. And we hope that your family is safe and healthy. And I also want to compliment you and the OSB for your very prompt action. Moving quickly within a few weeks of this pandemic hitting to make sure that people had options, that they wouldn't be in a situation where they were basically in default of their arrangements around bankruptcy was a very significant step. And I think it's important to underscore how prompt and how effective your actions and the actions of the OSB were, and the potentially positive impacts that people will be able to come through this pandemic without the crushing financial loss that comes from bankruptcy and not having met the obligations that they agreed to before the pandemic. So I thank you for that. I'm interested in knowing to what extent the OSB actually tracks the reasons why people run into financial difficulties. I mean, in Canada, we have the highest level of family debt in the industrialized world. It's similar debt levels, I'm sure you're aware, of what we saw in 1929. We're seeing an increasing concentration of wealth in very few hands. The top 1% having as much wealth as the bottom 80% of our country. Those figures as well are very similar to 1929. So it's like government policies, both the former government and the current government, are designed to provide the most support to the people at the top of the country and often forgets about so many others. So to what extent does the OSB track what the reasons are around bankruptcy? I'm thinking of things like the end of a marriage, the death of a family member, a disability, illness, loss of a job. Do you have those statistics which indicate why people are finding themselves in financial difficulty?
So first, thank you very much for your kind words. I truly appreciate those. We do ask for the reason for insolvency. I will say with a bit of a caveat, however, that our forms are not perfect. That is an open text field. So I've got some very talented people in my office who sort of have to weed through that and pull the data as best they can. And form updates is something that we do want to work on to improve our data. But I can tell you that in 2019, 69% of consumer insolvencies were due to what they called financial mismanagement. 37% were due to loss of income, 23% for medical reasons, 15% due to a relationship breakdown, and 7% from a business failure. So in that case, it would be somebody who filed a consumer insolvency, but listed at least 50% or more of their debts relating to a business.
Thank you. So obviously, people are giving multiple reasons. There's some overlap there.
Yeah, I guess they can. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of putting aside the issue of finances, what one could consider involuntary causes, health issues, a breakdown in a relationship, those kinds of things. Do you have any estimate of what percentage of those who find themselves in bankruptcy are it's because of those things that are beyond a person's control?
Yeah, it's hard to isolate based on the data that I have today, how that breaks out. And again, I feel like our forms might not be the perfect tool to give a great answer on that question, unfortunately.
Is that something that you could share with the committee, the raw data that you have?
Yeah, we could look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it would be helpful to understand. I note from an earlier question that you were asked that you don't propose policy changes. You don't feel that that's your purview. But understanding why people are finding themselves in bankruptcy often is a good indicator to legislators to put in place the programs and services that actually prevent them from doing that. And as I mentioned earlier, the increasing massive concentration of wealth, the situation of massive tax evasion that we're seeing costs $25 billion a year, according to the PBO. These are all factors that have an influence on regular people struggling to make ends meet. And the fact that Canada has this the sad history of being the worst in the Western industrialized world in terms of family debt that is being imposed on people because of the lack of services, lack of pharmacare and things like that. I certainly feel it in my own riding. People are connected to that. So that information would be very helpful, and any policy prescriptions you could provide would be helpful as well. I wanted to ask you about something that's a phenomenon certainly right across the country, which is people basically walking away from their businesses. They don't go through the bankruptcy route. They just realize, given the pandemic, that they have to, it's a sad situation, close the door and walk away and basically leave things. They don't have the ability to continue with their business. Are there any suggestions you can make about that, addressing that issue? And what is your sense in terms of businesses that are forced to go into bankruptcy given the pandemic and prior to the pandemic?
So it would be a policy question, I think, on the solutions for that problem. But certainly you are not wrong that the majority of businesses, we looked at the births and death rates of businesses, and it's about approximately, it seems to be about 3% of corporations actually file a formal insolvency proceeding. So you're correct in that. I do not believe, I would have to verify, that we collect a reason for insolvency, if that's your second question, in the corporate sense.
Okay, so that's not any information that you'd be able to share with us.
I certainly will if we have it, and then my only question is whether we collect that, but I will get back to you on that.
Peter, we'll have to move on. You will get a second round. We'll go to Mr. Cooper for 5 minutes, and Mr. Fragiskatis. Michael Cooper.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Lang. I just want to follow up in terms of having an understanding of the dramatic decrease that we've seen in terms of bankruptcies. In answer to a question posed by Mr. St. Marie, you listed some of the factors, including a slowdown in terms of the activity of creditors. What explains that? Is it a function, for example, of more people being out of work and therefore, from a practical standpoint, being in a position of being creditor-proof and that there aren't wages to garnish and so on?
I can only tell you what I've heard anecdotally. We don't, because again, we don't have data on files that we haven't received. But anecdotally, what we're hearing is that creditors are forbearing and being reasonable, both on the consumer side and on the business side. And I think that's about the fact that everybody realizes that this is an unprecedented, unfortunate situation that we hope is temporary. Certainly, the lockdown provisions are temporary and starting to ease. And as they start to get lifted, we'll see what the future will hold. Will businesses be able to successfully pivot or weather the storm and emerge as a viable business? In which case, as a creditor, you're actually better off working with that debtor because you continue to have a client rather than taking potential losses on the debt that they owe you. And on the consumer side, will consumers get their job back? And I think the banks have been doing a fair job on deferring mortgages where necessary, and we'll see where that ends up going over the long term.
Right, and I understand you're not in the business of making projections. However, and in fairness, in terms of your answer to Mr. Polyev, who asked about whether you would anticipate a dramatic spike, you said not necessarily, even though you're not in the business of making projections. And that's understandable because usually it's not the first thing one does is to file for bankruptcy. It's usually a 2, 3, 4, or 5 year process before one reaches that point. Now, you did note that pre-COVID, the numbers were relatively stable from 2011 onward. However, I would note that I'm looking at some numbers in October of 2019, there were 13,000 bankruptcies, which represented the highest number since September of 2009. And so that's concerning given the situation we were in pre-COVID during relatively good economic times. Would it be fair to say that given that, that although we might not see a dramatic spike, and again, you're not in the business of making projections, it's going to be a rough few years. And while you answer that, maybe if I could also just get you to comment on any trends that you see, not on the consumer side, but in terms of corporate insolvencies going forward.
So I think, we have to recognize that household debt levels were incredibly high, and continuing to rise over the past several years. And while the numbers of filings were high, the per capita numbers were stable. So people have been able to somehow manage those rising debt levels. And as I said, on paper, somebody might appear to be insolvent and not file. So these are the things that make it very hard to predict. But as I noted, on my slide that tracks the rates and has the GDP numbers, when you see a significant drop in GDP, you do see an increase in insolvencies. So if that's where we're headed, then I think we can expect an increase. On the corporate side, we do hear about a debt bubble. And so that's a concern, and we'll see how that plays out. But the important thing about corporate insolvencies is that largely we hope to see corporations go through a restructuring process. And particularly on the CCAA side, that's what it was really intended for, is to see them restructure, come out the other side as a viable business that saves jobs and contributes to the economy. So that's what I hope we will be able to see. And again, creditors will play an important role in that, because it's a very much of a negotiated outcome.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Just on that, because you mentioned the CCAA, where do you stand in terms of firm financial issues? Are you involved anyway in that, or is it left up mainly to the firm debt review boards? Are you involved in that aspect, or is the...
Sorry, are you talking about farmers?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we are not involved in that aspect at all.
Okay, that's what I mainly the firm debt review boards in that particular area, which itself needs to be improved in my view, but that's personal. Mr. Fragiskatis, and then on to Mr. Cumming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to officials and Ms. Lang in particular for the presentation. Ms. Lang, in the post-2008 period, where were we as far as the numbers show in terms of bankruptcies in Canada?
So we reached about 158,000 total bankruptcies. And if I just open my slide, I can tell you where we were on the per capita number, because that was our apex. In 2009, we reached 5.83 filings on a consumer side per 1,000 adults.
Okay, and I know that you've said that there's no way that you can project at this point. You don't have that ability to do so. But do you have any information that would allow one to make comparisons between then and now? Personally, or where we might be by the end of the year?
No, I don't. That's honestly, our office isn't really about that. We don't have a lot of economists, and that's not really one of the jobs that we do.
Okay, no, that's fine. You've been very good to raise a number of important issues with the committee, and you're doing a lot of hard work. So I understand that you can't provide every piece of information that MPs may ask for. I did also want to ask you, though, and I'm looking down at an article here. It's from Maclean's Magazine. It does quote the Office of Superintendent of Bankruptcy Canada. And it does so in the context of talking about what happens when one goes bankrupt. The heading in the just at the top of the paragraph reads, "Bankruptcy is not the end of the world." It then continues to say that a credit counselor or a licensed insolvency trustee is where folks go if they do find themselves in this very unfortunate situation. According to your office, in 2019, there were more than 137,000 Canadians who used these options to get a financial fresh start, as the article puts it. My question to you is, do we have the capacity if we do see a very high number of bankruptcies, to ensure that folks get that support, whether it is by accessing credit counselors or licensed insolvency trustees?
Yep, it's a great question, and it's something that my office has been looking at very carefully. We want to be sure that Canadians in need of help with their debts can get the help that they do need. And you know, the licensed insolvency trustee community, it has proven to be very nimble. They've added significant efficiencies over the past number of years. So I do truly believe that they will be able to do that. And my office will be there to support them by providing efficiencies as well. So, you know, for example, in 2009, one of the things that we were able to do was to put less of an emphasis on our rate of closing, which we pay close attention to because it's important not just to open files, but to close them in normal times. In 2009, we reduced the emphasis on that so that LITs could focus on opening files and doing that job effectively. And that's an example of something that we could do again to support the system.
Sure, and the article I don't think is making light of the matter at all, and I certainly don't mean to, but where it does read that bankruptcy is not the end of the world, I think it's an apt point. The reality is that people will find themselves in a position of bankruptcy. That is a fact, but we have seen situations before where people experience that and are able to come back with assistance. In fact, the Maclean's piece that I'm referencing does quote an individual that works in that sector as a licensed trustee. And I'll just read it to you here. He says that we've got enough bench strength, experience, and compassion to help Canadians going through this crisis as well. So the sector seems reassured, but I just wanted to put the question to you. And if I could just pick up on this point and continue with it. In the 2009 period, as you said, this was really the apex of numbers. This is where we saw the apex, rather, in terms of numbers when it came to bankruptcy post-2008. Did we have any challenges in terms of ensuring that people had access to credit counselors and or licensed insolvency trustees? Was that a problem at all during that time?
I was at the OSB at the time as a deputy superintendent, and certainly not on the insolvency side, which I can speak to. Things went extremely well in 2009, and we were able to help a lot of debtors get through their financial difficulties. Either with a bankruptcy or at the time, consumer proposals were on the rise. They've now exceeded 61% of filings, which is a truly positive piece of policy development in that in those cases, debtors actually, if they have assets, don't need to give up their assets. They need to negotiate with their creditors for what their creditors consider to be a fair and reasonable payment, often over a period of 5 years. So I think that'll be a positive development in the current situation as well. On the credit counseling side, I'll just add that that's sort of outside of my purview.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr.
One
Chair,
more, Peter?
Yeah, sure. There's one last question. And in fact, it picks up from our previous session today, where the consumer brought up the point about payday loans, and members raised concerns about payday loans. I'm wondering, in any of the data that you have, do you have numbers indicating, for example, the number of Canadians who have gone bankrupt, and how many of those particular individuals have experience with payday loans? Is there some kind of, I won't say correlation, but is there some kind of tie that you can bring to light there, if at all?
So first, I would say that, again, I have to apologize for our data on this. It's not perfect. The way that we would look at payday loans is based on the name of the creditor as entered by the licensed insolvency trustee. And of course, there are a multitude of organizations that would fall into that large basket of sort of subprime lending. But I did ask a while back for some information on payday loans, because it is an area of concern for me, for the lowest income debtors who may have no choice but to access subprime lending. And what we found is, and I can't compare to the rest of Canada, but what we found is that it appears that this facility is on the rise in use, and that in fact it's about 8% more prevalent with a second time or more filer. So then you see, it's actually a more worrisome trend in that somebody has a less creditworthy and has even fewer options in terms of how to access money that they may need. And often, these are to pay things like rent, groceries for the week, and things like that.
Right. No,
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Turning to Mr. Cumming, followed by Ms. Kotrakis. James?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lang, for your presentation today. I wasn't as puzzled about the numbers, that there hasn't been a significant increase in bankruptcies, because I think you've covered it. It's a laggard. And given the extent of this financial crisis, from the evidence that I've heard is most of the financial institutes or debtors are doing everything they can to avoid putting people into that situation, so to try to work their way through it. Do you think that's a fair analysis? I don't think these numbers indicate that we're in a financially healthy place because they're lower. I actually think we're not in a financially healthy place, but that's a reaction of the marketplace not to push people into bankruptcy, at least now. Would that be fair?
I think that's a fair assumption. I wouldn't say that I have, empirical data to support that.
Yeah. Okay. If we see a run in going out 6 months, when most of the government programs will likely come to a stop or start to phase out, and we'll have these deferrals. So we're going to have significant issues for both consumers and businesses. If we see a bit of a run, do you think that the Office of the Superintendent will have to modify some of the standards that are put in place related to creditors and repayment plans and some of the things that they have to do in bankruptcy, given the extent of the financial issue that we're seeing?
So most of the requirements in insolvency are set out in the legislation or regulations. As I mentioned, I do have directive making power, and we can provide some flexibilities on some requirements. And we would do that fairly carefully. We are sort of leaning towards areas where we can actually embrace technology and efficiencies. I often say to my team that we're being catapulted into the 21st century by having to go online and use all of this technology. But I'd rather see whether we can embrace it rather than trying to fight it and see it, assume that we're going to go back to normal. So we are exploring all those options that will provide significant efficiencies to the system. And for us, it's always about balancing the efficiencies and the gains with the risk of non-compliance. And so that's the delicate balance that we walk. So right now we have a bit of a pilot project that was not chosen by us, but by extending the remote delivery of services for LITs to March 31st, 2021, we can look at how that goes and how are debtors being served and are they getting the service and the advice that they need in the way that they need it. And if we can mitigate any risks, then that's an example of something that we could continue.
On corporate bankruptcies or people going in CCAA prior to, which is, for sure creditor protection in front of bankruptcy is always the desired approach. Some of the experience that I've seen is that, particularly when you hit a really difficult period like we're seeing right now, the banks won't act because if a business has zero revenue and they're struggling and they're on the bottom, that you might see an uptick in actions after they come off the bottom, so that there's some potential to reorganize or potentially put the company up for sale or do something with it. Do you see trends like that within, from what you've seen before, that it's not necessarily the bottom of the trough where we start to see the bankruptcies, it's a rebound shortly after that period?
Yeah, I don't know if I could speak to the fact that I've seen a trend in that regard. I think one trend that I would note from talking to the LIT community is certainly in the past few years an increase in informal workouts. so that creditors are working directly with debtors and finding a solution, and they don't necessarily need to file with my office. And so in that case, we don't have the data. And for me, anytime a company can resolve its financial issues and remain a viable going concern, that's great news, however you do that.
Okay, so I'll go back to my original question. So we shouldn't take that a reduction in the numbers on bankruptcy is any indication of financial health of both consumers and businesses at this time?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Turning to Ms. Koutrakis, followed by Elizabeth May. Annie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Lang, for your testimony today. The OSB's review of the LIT business practices notes that, and I quote, debtors served by LITs who had ongoing working relationships with debt consultants indicated that debtors had a very limited understanding of the role and obligations of the LIT in the insolvency process. Debtors were also usually not aware of the amount of payments they made towards debt consultant fees versus creditors' fees versus the fees of the LIT, end of quote. Since the release of this report in 2017, does a lack of debtor understanding of the insolvency process continue to be an issue? And will you be able to comment on the steps that have been taken by the OSB to improve debtor understanding of this process?
Yeah, so that was a report that was done after my departure from the OSB. I left for about 3 years. But since my return, we've taken a close look at what we're calling the debt advisory marketplace. Because as I've mentioned, there are credit counselors in Canada who are excellent, well-trained, really in looking out for the best interests of debtors and helping them to find solutions. And they are often regulated by the provinces. But there's a subset that really fall into sort of a no man's land. They're not regulated by my office, and they're not regulated by the provinces, and that's because they don't sort of fit the definition of provincial legislation. And what we have found is that in some cases, those players are sort of playing an intermediary role between the debtor and the licensed insolvency trustee, but that their real business model is they talk about being an advocate for the debtor, but they basically bring the debtor to the licensed insolvency trustee to file a consumer proposal. And what we've observed is that this isn't always positive for any of the parties. As you've mentioned, the debtor doesn't always get the full information. Creditors sometimes get a lower return compared to other files. So it's something that we're continuing to look at. It's a multi-pronged project. We're going to look closely at the LITs and make sure that they know that their duties are set out in the Act and that they need to abide by them. If not, there are consequences. And we also want to work with the provinces, and that's a tough job, but we want to start that project to see if we can, close the gaps on these legislative provisions.
Great. And in your opinion, can there be other measures that can be put in place, either by the OSB or or any other organization, the federal government, to protect the debtors during the insolvency process that have not been put in place yet?
One of the measures that we're undertaking is an awareness campaign, and I think we partner closely with the FCAC on that. So we added to our website a debt solutions portal, which is really intended to give debtors a full picture of all of their options, whether you have budgeting challenges, whether you have somewhat serious financial issues, or whether you're in dire straits. And really, we want to be an objective source of information for them, because I think that's one of the challenges is where are people getting their information? So we're continuing to work on that. We want to develop some tools in the coming year, such as a calculator that can sort of give you a bit more of an answer, a fact sheet. So different tools that different debtors will respond to and hopefully get those answers, and then go straight to the kinds of help that they really need.
Great. And in your opinion, Ms. Lang, is there any sign that people or businesses are actually taking advantage of the crisis to file for bankruptcy to improperly gain from the situation?
No, there aren't at this stage. I mean, the numbers are very low, as I said, but we do have compliance programs to look at the debtor side as well. And so if necessary, we will bring debtors in for an examination. If we think they've behaved improperly, we can oppose their discharge. We can seek additional compensation for their creditors. And of course, creditors and licensed insolvency trustees play a significant role in that as well.
Great. Do I have time for one last one?
You do. Go ahead.
Okay. So what is the treatment of the CERB and other COVID-19 related government support payments and insolvency proceedings?
So the CERB and the CESB for students both had specific wording added to their legislation that said that they would not be subject to the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. So what that means is that it will not be treated as income. If you go bankrupt, there's a surplus income provision that looks at your income, looks at all of your expenses, and if you cross a certain threshold based on your family size, you are required to pay additional amounts to your bankruptcy estate that'll be distributed to your creditors, and you're also required to stay in bankruptcy for a longer period, for 12 months longer. So CERB and CSB would not be part of that calculation in those cases. I think I can say consistently across the board with the other benefits that they were silent in terms of the treatment and insolvency.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your very, very interesting and very thorough testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Ms. May, followed by Mr. Julian. Elizabeth?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And merci. I shouldn't speak French because I put myself on the English channel, but I was going to thank Gabrielle Sainte-Marie properly for giving me some time. This discussion, by the way, and I'm sure the chair of this committee will recall, many of you wouldn't have been around when James Rajat really championed this a lot in bringing forward financial literacy and the need for more education for Canadians back maybe 10 years ago now. And I'm looking at the behavior of Canadians in COVID pandemic and the behavior of people in residents south of the border. And it's striking. And I wondered if I could ask you, Ms. Lang, to comment on it. But my understanding of the different reactions is Americans were saving quite a lot more before the pandemic hit. And when they got any emergency relief money during pandemic, they tended to save it. Canadians were spending more before pandemic. And when we got emergency relief money, we tended to spend it. So while retail sales plummeted across Canada, the consumer spending, particularly gigantic leaps in business for online sales, continued to basically keep pace with consumption. Obviously, there was a reduction, but it didn't seem to result in Canadians, even in the economic uncertainty we're facing, it didn't seem to result in an increased impulse to save. And I wonder if that impression is correct and if you've looked at that and can help explain it.
So I haven't looked at it other than to say that, when we look at where the economy is going and try to think about, what's going to come in terms of insolvency filings, I think that the Globe and Mail reported in June that the household saving rate in Canada actually increased quite significantly. On the spending side, I would say that for those that can afford to spend, consumer spending is a significant part of our GDP in this country. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing for those of us who can afford to spend, particularly in these times, and hopefully, think locally and help our small businesses.
Your mic's on. You're muted, Elizabeth.
I'm trying to unmute. Okay, there we go. No, I feel the same way. I think one of the reasons that our the economy has shrunk relatively less than the worst case scenario has been the Canadians are continuing to spend. But to the other points that we've talked about today, and I do also want to echo the thanks of colleagues on the actions taken to help keep Canadians from going into bankruptcy, to help counsel people, to provide information. But looking at this issue of payday loans and the high interest rates, I know you don't regulate in this area, but are you in a position to recommend any policy prescriptions for that kind of indebtedness that I think is shocking to a lot of us on this committee?
We would certainly be able to share our data, and I think the data almost speaks for itself in terms of the usage and then the increased usage on a repeat filing basis. I have looked at some other countries who have tried to find solutions to this problem. I think that the number one thing that strikes me, and again, it's not my mandate, but personally, as somebody who cares about indebted Canadians, is that you need to replace it with something. This is a need for access to funds that can't just be taken away. Mm-hmm. And I think recent reports actually from subprime lenders suggested that they are not seeing defalcations right now either. I think the majority of people that do take out those loans do manage to repay them. But as I think you heard from the FCAC, the interest rates, the cumulative interest rates, fees and charges can be significant. And I believe our registrar in bankruptcy in Toronto commented on one case where it actually amounted to, I believe she mentioned, 700%.
Holy mackerel. What country would you, I know I'm probably running out of time, but you mentioned you'd looked at other countries. Which country's policy prescriptions in this area would you think we should have a look at?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. I'd have to see if I can pull that back up and get back to you.
Thank you.
You get time for one more, Elizabeth.
Oh, my heavenly days. Okay, well, the other question I would have is, sorry, Mr. Chair, that never happens. So my last question would be, given what you're seeing happening in pandemic, how are you monitoring the reactions from businesses? Will you be monitoring to make any kind of changes as you see upticks or responses? How responsive can your office be to changes in bankruptcy rates and stresses?
Well, as I mentioned, engagement with stakeholders has been one of my strategic objectives for the organization, and we've increased our dialogue with the licensed insolvency trustee community significantly. And this has really helped us be in touch with sort of what's going on the ground, and that is why we were able to respond so quickly in mid-March, and we would continue to do that. I have biweekly calls with the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals, and we get a sense of what the needs are, what the challenges are. And licensed insolvency trustees across the country never hesitate to have productive and innovative solutions for our office on how we can help to improve things.
Well, thank you for your work. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Mr. Julian will be next, and then we'll have Mr. Kelly, Mr. Fraser. We'll have room for one more from the Conservative Party, and we'll end with Mr. McLeod. Mr. Julian.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd just like to reiterate, Ms. Lang, following Elizabeth May's question, it would be very helpful for us to have the international solutions that other countries have brought to bear because of what is becoming chronic in Canada. I mean, the level of family debt is unbelievably high. The profits in the banking sector, unbelievably high. I think people make the correlation that it's government policy that is putting this concentration of wealth into a few people's hands. 1% of the 1% wealthiest Canadians have as much of the wealth of the country as the bottom 80%. There's a problem there, and certainly the bottom 20% have barely 1% of the nation's wealth. There, in a nutshell, is why so many people come to you. I'm interested because of the factors that you've cited earlier that are mentioned. It seemed almost more anecdotally in terms of the reasons for filing. 23%, as I recall, were because of medical reasons. That could be long-term illness or disability. 15% because of the breakup of a relationship. We all know what a tremendous financial cost that can be for families. So that's putting those together. 38%, almost 40% of bankruptcies caused by circumstances beyond the control. That is a very interesting fact, and we appreciate having more information. The other fact that I think we would love to probe into is the number of consumers that are in high interest rate relationships either with their bank, with payday loans, with credit card companies. We really haven't seen the banks adjust their levels at all. In fact, they've reaped $5 billion in profits so far in this pandemic, which many people consider to be despicable when it's supposed to be all hands on deck, rather than profiteering from the immense largesse they've received from the federal government. So do you have numbers around the percentage of consumers and small businesses that are victims of this high interest rate charge that's based on your credit rating, but really is a way of skimming the public? And certainly payday loan companies, as you mentioned, up to 700% interest, are a sad example of that with no government action. Do you have a sense of what consumers and what small businesses are subject to these high interest rates that contribute to their bankruptcy?
So let me start with your first point that when I looked at other countries trying to find solutions to subprime lending, I didn't at the time find anybody that had actually solved the problem, but so I'll add that caveat. In terms of interest rates charged, my belief is that our intake forms do not ask that question. We ask the name of the creditor, and so for payday loans, we can look for certain keywords to determine if they're payday loans. Subprime loans, but not based on other information. So we wouldn't be able to report on actual interest rates charged in the majority of bankruptcies.
For other countries, some of the solutions that have been put out is lending circles, which are low interest loans provided through local credit unions. The credit union and cooperative movement as well. Some countries, as you're probably aware, have publicly owned postal banking, and so that's a window in the industry that forces the commercial bank rates down because they can no longer collude to boost rates up. They have to compete with a public sector bank. Are any of those things solutions that you've seen in your initial calls out to other countries as a possible solution for folks who need to have these loans but need to not have to pay literally an arm and a leg to access credit?
Yeah, that we have not discussed that aspect at all on our calls so far.
Okay, that would be something I'd certainly urge you to look into, and if you have any information to share with the committee as well. Are there any other factors that you track in terms of statistics for people who are applying, either consumers or businesses that are applying for bankruptcy? Are there any other factors that we haven't talked about on this committee meeting that are things that are taken into consideration or come up as you have people make these applications?
So we have a range of data. I'm not sure what you mean in terms of if you're asking about the different reasons for financial difficulty. As I mentioned, that's an open text field. So it actually is endless, the number of reasons that we can find. So the ones that I listed are the top 5.
Okay, but there are there other I guess I'm looking for tidbits of information as part of the application process that are relevant for the committee that we haven't asked you about yet.
Not that jumps to mind. We collect a lot of data on debtors, and a lot of it's available through our statistics.
Okay. Mr. Chair, you're being very generous. You want me to put a few more questions out there?
I was on mute. Sorry, I couldn't cut you off, Peter.
Okay.
But just spinning off that, Ms. Lang, from the regulatory side of things, are there any shortcomings that you face that the government needs to look at in terms of these times?
Again, so that would be a policy question for my colleagues that I said to address. Generally, I think that the Canadian insolvency system...
We don't mind telling them on your behalf, not at all. This is the Finance Committee, not I said. Don't worry about them.
I think the system works quite well in Canada. Generally very positive and the envy of many countries.
Okay, thank you. Turning then to Mr. Kelly and going on to Mr. Fraser. Pat?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to come back to Ms. Lang in your opening remarks when you mentioned that the number of filings had dropped after the pandemic began, or at least after the pandemic was resulting in the shutdown of large swaths of the Canadian economy. You attributed two factors in your opening remarks. You said that government supports were offsetting consumers and enabling them to avoid bankruptcy, and also the forbearance of creditors. And you've been asked already about this, and I'd like a little bit more detail about what that really looks like. I mean, we certainly want to avoid a catastrophic wave of bankruptcies that would result and cascade throughout the economy. We need to have things smoothed out over a longer period of time, but there are many types of forbearance of a creditor that are not going to ultimately be helpful in the economy. A creditor that simply decides not to take up a collection action and write off debt, that business, if they're writing off a debt, that impacts their ability to rehire or hire more staff, or to expand a business, or to do any of the things that they would require that the money that they've written off. So how much of this is the forbearance of creditors is simply, say, not having access to the court system right now, or simply being able to delay an action, or how much of this is simply bad debt that will ultimately result in further business failure?
So again, I don't have hard numbers on this kind of stuff because these are people that have not filed yet. I think in my remarks I suggested that these are some of the theories that we would put out there, but it's hard to say with certainty. I do believe that the courts have not been a factor from what I've heard. They've largely been accessible when needed. So I would say that's not a factor. I think that the other reason that is a key factor here is just the level of uncertainty and not knowing what's coming around the corner. And so that as things start to reopen and we see how businesses pivot or weather the storm, we'll see what the future will hold.
Okay, do you mean the uncertainty is a factor in people's decision to file now or to not file?
To not file, and for creditors to not force a filing. So if you have a relationship with a debtor, and they may be able to reopen and succeed, then it's probably in your best interest to wait and see if they can do that successfully, rather than to force a denouement right now.
Right, but the creditor still is owed the money, and so yes, being able to be if you are as a creditor, you're well enough capitalized that you can allow the debtor time. That's obviously ideal, but that still has a ripple and a negative effect throughout the economy, because that creditor has lost whatever other opportunity they have to. Whatever their business might be to employ Canadians, or to pay their own bills. So do you expect, at what point or when do you maybe think some of this will likely come to a head and see perhaps increased filings, or give you confidence that there will not be significantly increased filings?
I think once we get to whatever the future normal state is going to be, so full reopening Canada-wide, everybody's back to depending on their own incomes and profits for their businesses. That's probably when we'll start to see what the future will hold.
Okay, and of course, returning to where we were still returns that would be a return to a point where we had. In nominal terms, the highest number of filings in a decade, adjusted for population growth, perhaps not quite as severe, but still higher than they had been in a number of years. So that would be the normal that we're returning to.
Well, one question will be: Will consumer behavior change? Will people start to, do a little bit better on the savings front based on their experience through COVID?
Right, indeed. I guess perhaps I'm thinking more on business bankruptcy and the avoidance of those. Perhaps then, prior to the crisis, but prior to the pandemic, was the bankruptcy statistics that you had in the first few months of 2020, the higher numbers that you had seen, were they both on the business and consumer categories?
No, BIA business filings have been on a steady decline since about, I believe it's 2012. On the CCAA, we see ebbs and flows over the years. Based on slide 17 in my deck that I provided, we had 15 filings in Q4. So CCAA numbers are never overly high, but 15 in a quarter is higher than normal. And we had 6 in Q3, 4 in Q2 of 2019.
So consumer filings remain your primary concern and the primary vulnerability of the Canadian economy in your area.
Both have significant impact. A single CCAA filing can involve a large number of employees. And then, of course, we have the majority of the numbers of pure filings are on the consumer side. So we pay attention to both.
Okay. So, and you said that the courts and the ability to function through the pandemic is not a factor. It's simply the creditor's decision to not force issues is where this forbearance works itself out.
Yeah, and I as I mentioned, there are often some informal conversations going on, and my understanding from that side of the business for licensed insolvency trustees and professionals is that they are very busy already, even if they may not have done a filing, and they may be finding solutions that avoids a filing altogether as well.
Okay, thank you all, Mr. Fraser, and then Mr. McLeod will wrap it up. Mr. Fraser.
Thanks so much. What a perfect place to pick off. To pick up, you mentioned that there may be solutions that can be found that can avoid filings at all. I'm curious if you have thoughts on what the federal government might be able to do to encourage those sort of informal conversations that lead to solutions that prevent filings in the first place.
I would think that would probably be far outside of my mandate to opine upon.
I think I struggle a little bit because you stick so hard to the data. I think we're in the business of trying to find solutions before the problems arise. So maybe I'll approach it in a different way. Before the pandemic, were there certain systemic bottlenecks that existed in the receivership and bankruptcy process? You mentioned the courts to date have been holding up. I'm wondering if there is an increase in the volume of filings. Are there any sort of links in the chain or steps along the critical path towards a bankruptcy that were close to at capacity that might fail if there is an increase in bankruptcies?
On the business side or on the consumer side, or?
I was thinking on the business side, but I'm interested in both answers.
Yeah, I mean, the CCAA process is very court-driven, and so that might be something to watch, certainly. I know that the commercial courts in Canada are very busy. On the BIA business side, a little bit less so. And then on the consumer side, I mentioned that we've made significant changes through, there were changes in the 2009 legislation that increased the number of types of filings that could receive an automatic discharge. And so the majority of those cases do not have to go to court. So that was an important savings on court time.
I'm curious, are there certain regions in Canada? Obviously, the provincial court systems would be the place that most of these CCAA cases would end up in the first instance. Are there certain regions or even cities? I know you used to practice in Calgary, which had a very well orchestrated commercial bench, and I've moved back home a few years ago to small town Nova Scotia, where I'm from, and we don't exactly have the same capacity within our court system here. Have you ever done done an analysis, or do you have any views on which regions of the country may be busiest or closest to capacity, I guess is a better way to put it?
No, I wouldn't be able to speak to who's closest to capacity. But one thing I would say is that, as I mentioned, with my office kind of being catapulted into the 21st century, so too have the courts, and that it may be possible that they can leverage technology and find efficiencies that way as well. So that might solve a bit of the pressure.
It's funny. I've got a local judge just moved into the house next to me. Maybe I'll chat with him about it. I've got an additional question that I'm quite concerned about. I think one of the reasons that you haven't seen the dominoes start falling is because there have been a mix of emergency supports that are landing in the right place. There's been, as you've pointed out, informal dealings because there's an incentive for a creditor to not force a debtor into bankruptcy because they might come out on the other side. I want to make sure that we don't get in the business of throwing good money after bad if there's companies who are not going to come through this. I would rather deal with that now rather than spend a lot of taxpayers' money to float structurally unsound companies through a difficult period. Are there particular factors that you've observed historically that that would be indicators as to when a company is likely to succeed a financial storm like this?
So that wouldn't be data that we would have because we have the companies that have filed a formal proceeding. Although, as I mentioned, many of those are filing and doing a restructuring and coming out the other end. But that would certainly be a good question for policymakers to look at.
So I'm curious. One of the things I've seen from sort of commentators in the news on the issue of bankruptcies is we're likely to see if perhaps when the emergency supports are no longer in place or when taxes become due or whatever the case may be, when we have a clearer picture of what normal looks like, to use your analogy, that's when we'll have a handle on whether things have gone wrong or not. There's been certain sectors that have been hit very, very hard. I'm thinking restaurants, for example, tourism operators, and I've seen some concern raised about the potential for essentially significant liquidation efforts across entire industries all at the same time. Have you ever seen an instance where an entire sector faced extraordinary pressure that led to difficulties in the liquidation process? I'm essentially trying to find all the things that could go wrong should there be an uptick in bankruptcies, and wondering if you've seen them before and what lessons there may be. So have you ever seen anything like that on the liquidation side of things?
So, I haven't studied my historical stats that closely to be able to say that I have, but I would say that I don't think a specific sector suffering, inordinately versus other sectors would have an impact in our capacity to handle the insolvency filings.
Okay, we will wrap it up there unless you got a really critical. Okay, Mr. McLeod, all the way from the Northwest Territories, you get to wrap her up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation to the superintendent. I just have one quick question regarding number of bankruptcies in the Indigenous population. I'm not sure that's data that you collect, but I'm curious to see, to hear what percentage of bankruptcies amongst Indigenous people are versus what the rest of the population is facing.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is not data that we collect at the moment, and it's something that we will look at when we update our forms and work with StatsCan to see how we can properly collect that kind of data.
And when is the form supposed to be updated?
Well, we will see. It's definitely something that I want to focus on this year to the extent that we can. Right now, all of our efforts since March have been focused on COVID-19 issues.
Okay, so you don't collect the data for the Indigenous corporations or the Indigenous, the personal information, right?
No, I don't believe for corporations either. No, unfortunately, we don't collect any visible minority data at all.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, I don't believe there's any other. I don't see any other hands coming up. Thank you, Ms. Lang. You've got an important role to play. I come out of the farm sector and have been involved in quite a few farm debt review cases, and people who have been in financial trouble, they they certainly never want to get into financial trouble again. So if anything can be done to help them get through and be productive in society, then that's an important role that you have to play. And I would say, if there is some things you want to tell ISED, don't be afraid to give any of us a call, and we'll tell them for you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank all your staff for the work that you do in your area.
Okay,
in terms of bankruptcy.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
All right, with that, folks, we'll call it a day, and meeting adjourned.